Chapter 2203. Shenzhen on the square. Two parties were confronting each other. On one side were Shenzhen, Zhang Ao, Duan Muqing, and a large number of Shenzhen's disciples. On the other side, there were only a few people led by a young man. However, even though Shenzhen had more people, the young man seemed to have the upper hand. The young man had a look of disdain on his face. He looked down on Shenzhen and the others. Most importantly, the young man and the others were emitting powerful auras, suppressing Zhang Ao and the others until their faces turned red. The few in the lead were all great Dao realm experts. Although Zhang Ao and the others were strong, they were still a long way from the great Dao realm. Therefore, in terms of aura, they were far inferior to the young man. However, the young man and the others were overbearing, which made Zhang Ao and the others furious. A bunch of ants. Ask your sect leader to come out and see me. The young man looked at Zhang Ao and the others arrogantly. A look of disdain flashed across his face. Who do you think you are? This is Shenzhen's territory. I hope you can know your place. Otherwise, Shenzhen doesn't welcome people like you. Zhang Ao suppressed the anger in his heart and spoke in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Who do I think I am? The young man sneered. I'm afraid I'll scare you ants to death if I tell you. Listen up. I'm one of the emissaries of the Sacred Cosmos Alliance. I'm here to recruit soldiers today. Fine, I'll tell you directly. You have to gather 1 billion disciples to join the Alliance within a year and become one of the Alliance's ordinary soldiers. The young man said arrogantly, Sacred Cosmos Alliance? What's that? Zhang Ao and the others were confused. They didn't know about the Sacred Cosmos Alliance at all. However, as Shenzhen's disciples, elders, and protectors, Zhang Ao and the others naturally defended Shenzhen. Even if they didn't know about the Sacred Cosmos Alliance, if they became ordinary soldiers of the Sacred Cosmos Alliance, how many of the 1 billion people could return in the end? It was even possible that all of them would be wiped out. We have never heard of the Sacred Universe Alliance. Moreover, Shenzhen is an independent force, so none of us will join the Alliance. You can leave now. Zhang Ao said coldly. How dare you? As people of the Holy Cosmos, you Shenzhen people have the obligation to join the army. You are simply disgraceful. A man behind the young man shouted. He immediately took a step forward and threw a punch at Zhang Ao. Bang! Zhang Ao didn't even have time to react before he was sent flying by this initial Dao expert's punch. Blood gushed out of his mouth in midair. He was actually heavily injured. Whoosh! Duan Muqing and the other Shenzhen disciples were enraged. In an instant, everyone's divine consciousness enveloped the young man and the others. All of them were seething with killing intent and were about to kill these people. Of course, the prerequisite was that they had the strength to kill the young man and the others. However, the young man only had a cold smile on his face. Although Shenzhen had many disciples, they couldn't do anything to him at all. At this moment, Murong Yu's slaves didn't appear. Their goal was to protect Shenzhen, so they wouldn't attack unless it was a matter of life and death. Otherwise, if anyone came to provoke them, they would have to attack. How would they have time to cultivate? Within a year, your sect leader must bring 1 billion people to report to the Infinite Palace. Otherwise, there is no need for Shenzhen to continue existing. The Infinite Palace will not tolerate the existence of disgraceful people like you. The young man didn't bicker with Zhang Ao and the others. It seemed that the young man felt that it was too shameful to bicker with ants like Zhang Ao. Therefore, after saying this, he turned around and was about to leave. Zhang Ao and the others gritted their teeth, but there was nothing they could do. In terms of strength, they were far inferior to the other party, so they could only let these people leave. Just as the young man was about to leave, Murong Yu's cold voice sounded in the square. You beat up my people, and you're just going to leave like this? At the same time, Murong Yu and the beginning of Dao Slave also appear between the young man and Zhang Ao. Holy Lord! Zhang Ao and the others were overjoyed. After Murong Yu returned, they could finally breathe a sigh of relief. After all, Murong Yu was their soul. With a great god like Murong Yu around, they were more at ease. The young man instantly stopped and turned to look at Murongyu, then frowned. "You're Shangzhen's sect leader, Murongyu? Fifth level of the Heaven Realm? Fifth level of the Heaven Realm? Shangzhen's sect leader? Emissary, I don't think there's a need to waste time with this Shangzhen. The Holy Lord has such strength, let alone their disciples. Not to mention 1 billion, even 10 billion people would be useless." A cultivator behind the young man's disdainful voice sounded in Murongyu and the other's ears. The young man smiled. Although the battle with the divine universe or the martial universe mainly depends on the top powerhouses, ordinary soldiers are also indispensable. Although Shangzhen is trash, 1 billion people as cannon fodder is not bad. He said this in front of Murongyu and the others without any scruples. Other than contempt, there was only contempt. Zhang Ao and the others were furious. They regarded Shangzhen as their home, but these people trampled on Shangzhen's dignity in front of them. This was unacceptable. However, as Shangzhen's sect leader, Murongyu's expression did not change. With his status and strength, how the world viewed Shangzhen no longer affected him. Whether it was belittling or praising Shangzhen, it had nothing to do with him. What he wanted to do was to improve the strength of Shangzhen and the others. He wanted these disciples who had been following him from the cultivation world, immortal world, divine world, and so on to become stronger. Moreover, he knew how terrifying the divine universe and the martial universe were. If Shangzhen and the 1 billion people went to the battlefield, they would definitely not return. Therefore, if he could avoid it, he would not let Shangzhen's disciples go to the battlefield. However, it was useless to say this to the emissary or the infinite palace. At least Patriarch Hun E could operate. Therefore, Murongyu did not care about what the young man and the others said. However, there was another thing that Murongyu was very concerned about. He was a very protective person. Zhang Ao was injured by the other party. Not only did he have to get back at them, but he also had to do it 10 times or 100 times. Therefore, you can leave. But he has to stay. Murongyu pointed at the cultivator who attacked Zhang Ao and said coldly. The young man sneered. As for the cultivator Murongyu was pointing at, he sneered, "Why should I? Based on the fact that you touched my men? Tell me, are you willing to stay, or do you want me to make you stay? If I make a move, I won't be able to control my power. When the time comes, something bad might happen." Murongyu said calmly, but his words were filled with sharp, killing intent. "Ha ha ha." The cultivator laughed and stood out with a disdainful expression. "If you are so capable, why don't you make me stay?" He was courting death. Zhang Ao and the others looked at the cultivator with sympathy. He dared to talk back to the Divine Lord. He was truly extraordinarily daring. Murongyu shook his head. "You asked for it. Don't blame me if I hit you too hard." As he spoke, Murongyu took a step forward. Whoosh! Everyone felt their vision blur, and Murongyu appeared in front of the cultivator who attacked Murongyu. He even slapped the cultivator's head with his hand. So fast! What frightening power! The cultivator's eyes widened as he stared at Murongyu. Fear filled the depths of his eyes. The people next to him noticed that as the cultivator spoke, his 7 orifices began to bleed. As soon as he finished speaking, he slowly fell to the ground, no longer showing any signs of life. He had been killed by Murongyu with a single blow. A 5th-level Sky Realm cultivator had killed an initial Dao expert with a single blow. No one on Shangzhen's side was shocked. In fact, they just thought it was normal. However, the young man was frightened. "You're courting death." The young man reacted in an instant and ruthlessly slapped Murongyu with his palm. Seeing the young man attack, the Dao Lords hiding in the dark were about to attack. However, at this moment, they received an order from Murongyu not to show themselves. Whoosh! The moment the young man attacked, the upgraded Chaos Blade appeared in Murongyu's hand. Then, the Chaos Blade erupted with a terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth and slash the young man's large hand. Bang! The young man's large hand was directly shattered into powder. After shattering the opponent's large hand, the Chaos Blade continued forward, and before the young man could react, it had already slashed his body. A terrifying power erupted, and the young man was directly sent flying. Just like how arrogant he was earlier, he spat out blood in the void. How dare you attack the emissary? Attack together and kill him. The young man's people roared and charged at Murongyu. Ants! Murongyu sneered, and the chaos blade in his hand slashed out. Bang! 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 There wasn't even a Tao Lord among them. So how could they resist the attack of the chaos blade that even a Tao Lord emissary couldn't block? One by one, they were sent flying like broken ragdolls. Streams of blood splattered across the void. It was shocking. Fortunately, Murongyu didn't kill them. Otherwise, the emissary's head would have fallen to the ground. Since he had already shown his power, Murongyu didn't want to offend the emissary and the people of the Infinite Palace too much. Although he wasn't afraid, he didn't want to have trouble coming one after another. You killed the emissary and attacked the emissary. Murongyu, do you know that this is a crime punishable by death? A cultivator stood out and looked at Murongyu with rage. Murongyu didn't say anything. He just waved the chaos blade in his hand. The initial Tao expert was so scared that his face turned pale and he took several steps back. Chapter 2204. Murongyu, you're rebelling. The emissary stood up in a sorry state and looked at Murongyu angrily. Terrifying, killing intent flickered in the depths of his eyes. If he had the ability, he definitely wouldn't waste his breath on Murongyu. Instead, he would kill Murongyu and the Shenzhen disciples in front of him with a single punch. However, he didn't dare to make a move. Not to mention that Murongyu still had a Tao Lord expert who hadn't made a move yet. Just Murongyu with the Chaos Blade wasn't someone he could fight against. He could feel that Murongyu had already shown mercy. Otherwise, Murongyu definitely had the ability to kill him. Scram, don't let me see you again. Otherwise, my treasured blade won't have eyes. Murongyu glanced at him and cursed in a deep voice. Thinking about it, Murongyu felt quite proud. Since ancient times, who dared to use their own strength to curse a Tao Lord expert at the Heaven Realm? He was probably the first person, right? In fact, he was already the first in history, and there would be no one like him in the future. The emissary was so angry that his face was ashen. Murongyu, do you know who you've offended? I'm one of the emissaries of the Sacred Cosmos Alliance. You can't afford to offend me. The emissary knew that Murongyu definitely wouldn't dare to kill him. Otherwise, he would be like that initial Tao expert who was killed by him with a single slap. Murongyu was afraid of the Sacred Cosmos Alliance behind him. Thinking of this, the emissary became even more unrestrained. Murongyu had offended him today, so he definitely wouldn't let him have a good time. However, what he didn't know was that Murongyu wasn't afraid of him. How was he afraid of the Sacred Cosmos Alliance? In terms of backing, the entire soul race was Murongyu's backing. In terms of background, how many could compare to him? However, even without the support of the soul race, Murongyu would still kill that initial Tao expert without hesitation. Shenzhen's disciples, not everyone dared to ride on their heads and shit on them. You're really thick-skinned. If you don't leave now, when will you? Do you all want to crawl out like dogs? Zhang Ao sneered. The emissary's face turned ashen with anger. He knew that there was nothing he could do to Murongyu today. Therefore, he coldly shouted, turned around, and quickly left with his subordinates. However, before he left behind some harsh words. Murongyu, when you arrive at the Alliance, I will deal with you properly. I'll let you know who you have offended. Murongyu only responded with a sneer. Although Murongyu didn't care about the emissary, the Sacred Cosmos Alliance, Zhang Ao and the others didn't think so. After the emissary and the others left, Zhang Ao and the others' faces fell. They all looked extremely gloomy and worried. Although they didn't know what was going on, the Sacred Cosmos Alliance knew that they were much stronger than Shenzhen. If Shenzhen disobeyed the Alliance's orders, he would probably be wiped out from the endless universe overnight. In the main hall, everyone looked gloomily at Murongyu, who was sitting on the main seat with a gloomy expression. Sacred Master, what's going on with the Sacred Cosmos Alliance and the conscription order? Are we really going to conscript 1 billion soldiers? Finally, Duanmuqing couldn't bear the oppressive atmosphere and asked first. Take a look. As he spoke, Morong Yu threw out a jade slip. The emissary had left this jade slip for Shenzhen. Other than a simple introduction of the Sacred Cosmos Alliance and the possible war in the future, it was about the conscription order. After reading the information in the jade slip, Zhang Ao and the others' faces became even gloomier. They finally roughly knew about the sacred cosmos, the divine cosmos, and the martial Tao cosmos. To them, those were extremely distant matters. Moreover, with Shenzhen's strength, the 1 billion soldiers would definitely be cannon fodder. Morong was speechless. He'd originally thought that the Sacred Cosmos Alliance had nothing to do with him. However, he hadn't expected the Alliance to do something like this. In reality, the conscription order wasn't just targeted at Shenzhen, but all the powers in the Sacred Cosmos. The Sacred Cosmos Alliance was formed by the top powers in the Sacred Cosmos. Those top powers were basically distributed in different corners of the Sacred Cosmos. Below every top power were many second-grade powers. Below them were even more third-grade powers. For example, powers like Shenzhen, the mysterious Heavenly Palace, and the 100 Battle Sect were considered the lowest-level powers in the endless universe. Above Shenzhen, the mysterious Heavenly Palace, and the 100 Battle Sect was the Infinite Palace. The Outer Liang Palace was even stronger than the combined forces of Shenzhen, the mysterious Heavenly Palace, and the 100 Battles Sect, because the Infinite Palace had Downlord Realm experts. In the Sacred Cosmos Alliance, only Downlord level powers that possessed Downlord Realm experts would have a place. Only then would they be able to speak a single word. For example, powers like Shenzhen and the 100 Battles Sect didn't have any status at all. However, every single power wanted to gain a foothold in the Alliance. So, a power like the Infinite Palace had to recruit soldiers from the other powers within its area of influence. Every single power recruited 1 billion soldiers. Of course, like Shenzhen, the Infinite Palace didn't request that all of the 1 billion soldiers be Shenzhen's disciples. It merely gave Shenzhen a quota of 1 billion soldiers. As for how many of the 1 billion soldiers would be Shenzhen's disciples, there was no restriction at all. Just like Shenzhen's recruitment of 1 billion soldiers, there wasn't even a single Shenzhen's disciple. Because Shenzhen could recruit soldiers from the other powers within his area of influence. If every single power had 1 billion soldiers, then how many soldiers would the entire Sacred Cosmos Alliance have? Even using the unit trillion to describe, it could be considered a comparatively small number. However, Morong understood as well. It was very likely that they were facing the strength of the entire Divine Cosmos. The Divine Cosmos was stronger than the Sacred Cosmos. Now, they were even using the strength of the entire Divine Cosmos to attack the Sacred Cosmos. If the Sacred Cosmos didn't fight back with all its strength, then it would probably be easily annihilated. However, Shenzhen's disciples weren't strong, and they would definitely be cannon fodder if they were dragged onto the battlefield. Moreover, they were only recruiting soldiers from the other powers. After all, those people were living beings as well. Morong didn't want to see them lose their lives because of a single order from him. So, it was slightly difficult for him. As a member of the Sacred Cosmos, he had an obligation to send troops to resist the invaders. However, he didn't want his people to lose their lives. Divine Lord, the Sacred Cosmos Alliance is so strong. Looks like we have no choice but to send troops. If we can send troops, it should be a good thing for Shenzhen, said Jia Shui, one of the 4 leaders of the Chaos Battle Team. The 4 Chaos Battle Teams were Green Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise. Even though Shenzhen had reached an extremely high position, these 4 battle teams had always maintained their position. The leaders of the 4 battle teams, Yu Jia, Duan Muqing, Mu Lanxun, and Jia Shui, were already important figures in Shenzhen. All of them were elders of Shenzhen. Their statuses were similar to Zhang Ao, Yang Man, Sima Ruyu, and Pei Pei Yu. However, they were different from Zhang Ao and the other elders and protectors. Jia Shui and the other 3 were in charge of the most terrifying battle teams in Shenzhen. Currently, the battle teams had gathered most of the strongest disciples in Shenzhen. These people usually cultivated together. Hence, in a battle, they cooperated with each other, and their battle power was extremely terrifying. Moreover, the four battle teams had been continuously developing, and now they had expanded to 4 million people. Every battle team had reached a scale of 1 million people. Although these 4 million people were only a small portion of Shenzhen's disciples, their battle power was extremely terrifying. However, their combat power was extremely terrifying. They could even resist the attacks of the remaining disciples of the sage sect. Swoosh! Everyone looked at Jia Shui. Jia Shui smiled. She did not feel nervous at all. After so many years of accumulation, Jia Shui and the others were not only the most powerful people in Shenzhen, but they also had the highest statuses. Among the 8 of them, any one of them would be a great general. If there's really a battle, we can bring the people of the 4 battle teams out to experience the flames of war. Although we have always had experience, we are facing beasts that do not have much intelligence. If we can experience the flames of war, the people of the 4 battle teams will be greatly improved. Although, we may suffer a lot of losses. But this kind of thing has to be experienced eventually. Otherwise, how can we help our Holy Lord unify the holy universe in the future, or even dominate the endless universe? Murong looked at Jia Shui in surprise. Every single one of them had lofty ambitions. However, Murong never expected Jia Shui to have such lofty ambitions. If we don't go through the flames of war, how can the 4 battle teams become the strongest battle teams in the endless universe? Jia Shui smiled. Murong's expression was a little serious. Jia Shui, do you know? If we go to the Alliance, do you know? In the end, the 4 battle teams will all die in battle. 1 billion people will die in battle, including you and me. Jia Shui smiled again. As a part of the holy universe, we have the obligation to send troops to resist the invaders. Otherwise, once the holy universe is conquered, our outcome will not be any better. A good man should be ambitious. He should charge and break through the enemy lines and die in battle. You are at most a good daughter. Zhang Ao rolled his eyes and looked at Jia Shui speechlessly. However, everyone present was fired up by Jia Shui's words. Murong already knew the intentions of these people. At this moment, Murong Xian stepped out and looked at Murong Yu. Father, since the 4 battle teams are going to battle, I think our holy suppression battle team can also go. Murong Yu was stunned. He looked at Murong Xian with a puzzled expression. Although Murong Xian was his son, he had never heard of the holy suppression battle team. Moreover, Murong Yu saw Zhang Ao, Duan Muqing, and even Zhao Jiqing were stunned. Murong Yu was a little proud. I can guarantee that our holy suppression battle team is not inferior to the 4 battle teams, whether it is in terms of numbers, equipment, or strength. Murong Yu was also involved. Murong Yu was even more puzzled. Chapter 2205. Dad, you're just an absentee boss. Of course, you don't know about the saint-suppressing battle team. Murong Lin rolled her eyes at Murong Yu. Murong Yu's face darkened, then he smiled embarrassedly. He really didn't know about the saint-suppressing battle team. He hadn't even heard of it. Murong Yin also rolled her eyes at Murong Yu. Then she slowly explained, the real Shenzhen is actually a secret battle team formed by Big Brother and Little Brother. The people in it are all geniuses among the core disciples of Shenzhen. Every one of them is extremely talented and loyal, so we don't need to worry about their loyalty. Moreover, after the saint-suppressing battle team was formed, it became the secret force of Shenzhen. Other than a few people who know about it, not many people know about it. Murong Yu couldn't help but stare at Murong Yin and the others. They had done their best to keep it a secret, so it was normal that he didn't know. However, even with his identity as the Holy Lord of Shenzhen, he didn't know about it. One could imagine how mysterious Murong Xian's battle team was. Murong Yi continued. The saint-suppressing battle team is divided into heaven, earth, and earth battle teams. Among them, Big Brother is the commander of the saint-suppressing battle team. Li Ling, Gu Xiang, and Su Hegi are the commanders of the heaven, and earth battle teams respectively. Murong Yu and Murong Yi were Murong Yu's 2 sons. Gu Xiang and Su Hegi were Murong Yu's two sons-in-law. As for Li Ling, this guy was Murong Yu's disciple, and also the son of Murong Yu's good brother, Li Feng. It could be said that the saint-suppressing battle team was Murong Yu's private army. However, the whole Shenzhen was brought up by Murong Yu. The whole Shenzhen belonged to him. Therefore, in reality, the Sacred Suppression Squad was no different from Shenzhen's disciples. However, Murong Yu was quite gratified that these little fellows had secretly trained such a strong army, even though he had never seen this group of power soldiers before. However, Murong Xian, Murong Yi, and the others were not people who were fond of grandiose achievements. Since they dared to swear that the Sacred Suppression Battle Team was not inferior to the Primal Chaos Battle Team, the Sacred Suppression Battle Team must have the ability to do so. Unlike the Primal Chaos Battle Team, our Sacred Guardian Battle Team only gathers together during training. Usually, they're scattered all over the place, Gu Xiaoyang said. Seeing the confusion on Murong Yu's face, Su Hegi smiled and said, "Don't worry, Sacred Leader. We're not part of the Chaos Team. We have a sense of propriety when it comes to choosing our members." Murong Yu nodded. If these little rascals pulled the Chaos Squad closer to the Sacred Suppression Squad, then there would be no need. After all, if the two squads had missions at the same time, then which squad should the people from the two squads go to? Chaos Squad, Sacred Suppression Squad. A total of 8 million people? This number has already surpassed the squads. Let's call them the Chaos Squad and Sacred Suppression Squad from now on. Murong Yu pondered for a while and decided. No one had any objections. Just as Murong Yu said, there were too many people in the 8 squads. Moreover, there were 4 squads under the Sacred Suppression Squad and the Chaos Squad. It was a little repetitive. It was not bad to call them an army. However, we're facing the Divine Universe and Martial Universe. They're stronger than our Sacred Universe in terms of overall strength, especially the Divine Universe. Their universe is facing destruction. They're desperate and will definitely risk their lives. In addition, our Shenzhen's disciples are not comparable to the average strength of the Sacred Universe. So, it was normal for Murong Yu to be worried. If there was a universe war, then these 8 million people might be directly annihilated by the Cultivator Army. They wouldn't even be able to make a splash. Murong Xian, Jia Shui, and the others looked at each other. Although Jia Shui had a grand plan, the huge gap in strength made any ingenious plan useless. However, Murong Yu smiled. Just as Jia Shui said, the people of the 2 squads could only become stronger after experiencing the flames of war. Only then could they truly become the number 1 soldier in the endless chaos. Everyone looked over and stared blankly at Murong Yu. The flames of war might cause our 2 squads and Shenzhen's disciples to suffer some losses. But which cultivator doesn't want to experience this? Without fighting, without bloodshed, they still can't reach the peak. So, I've decided that this time, I'll personally lead the team. I'll be the commander and bring our 2 squads of Shenzhen and 1 billion disciples to the Alliance. Murong Xian, Jia Shui, and the others were overjoyed. These were all warlike people. Little did they know that war was extremely cruel. In the end, how many of these people would be able to stand here today? Zhang Ao. Here. Zhang Ao stepped out. From today onwards, choose 500 million Shenzhen's disciples from Shenzhen. Remember, we can't force them. We need willing disciples. At the same time, while recruiting, we'll also explain to them the dangers of this war. The remaining 500 million soldiers and horses recruit from other forces within Shenzhen. Murong Yu directly gave the order. Zhang Ao immediately went out to handle the matter, and in the end, Murong Yu left behind the commanders of the 2 squads. Immediately gather all the soldiers of the 2 squads. Before we depart, I have to strengthen their strength. The Primal Chaos Army and the Saint Suppression Army were Shenzhen's 2 trump cards. In the future, they would mainly rely on them to conquer other universes. So, Murong Yu decided to give them special treatment and try to increase their strength as much as possible. Murong Xian, Jia Shui, and the others all went to gather the soldiers. Murong Yu's body flashed, and he used Hichu Luoshu's teleportation ability to return to the Soul Race. After the Sacred Universe Alliance was established, the Soul Race was one of the main forces that formed the Sacred Universe Alliance. Many great beings had already left for the headquarters of the Sacred Universe Alliance. However, Hun Yi was still in the Soul Race. The leader of the Sacred Universe Alliance was the Great Elder of the Soul Race. Other than the leader, there were also 10 vice leaders, 100 elders, and 1,000 attendants. The leader was the commander of the entire Sacred Universe Alliance, and he controlled the power of the entire Sacred Universe Alliance. However, although this leader had great power, he wasn't a Sacred Universe master. He couldn't directly control the entire universe, because he could only be above the Sacred Universe Alliance. Furthermore, he had to discuss with the 10 vice leaders how to send out the troops. The purpose of restricting each other was to prevent the Alliance leader from doing whatever he wanted. The 10 vice leaders represented the 10 pinnacle powers of the Sacred Universe Alliance. The Soul Race was naturally one of the pinnacle powers of the Sacred Universe Alliance. Naturally, Hun Yi represented the Soul Race and became one of the vice leaders. The 10 vice leaders directly listened to the leader, but they didn't completely listen to him. Some major matters needed to be discussed together, and the final decision would only be made after a majority of it was passed. Other than that, the 10 vice leaders had complete control over the powers they belonged to. After all, these powers were originally the powers they belonged to. Under the vice leaders were the 100 elders. These elders held the position of elders in the Alliance, and they were the people with the highest status and power in the Alliance, apart from the leader and vice leaders. They had a high status and power. Apart from holding the position of elder in the Alliance, every elder was the leader of a pinnacle power in the Sacred Universe Alliance. Hence, only the leaders of the 100 pinnacle powers in the Sacred Universe Alliance were qualified to become elders in the Alliance. Under the elders were the attendants. Like the elders, every attendant was the leader of a first-rate power in the Sacred Universe Alliance. Actually, it didn't mean that there were only 100 pinnacle powers and 1,000 first-rate powers in the Sacred Universe Alliance. Some of the pinnacle and first-rate powers didn't join the Alliance, or after joining, their leaders weren't willing to hold a position in the Alliance, of course. The structure of the Alliance wasn't just below that. Under the attendants, there were many positions. After all, most of the Sacred Universe Alliance were second-rate, third-rate, and even unrated powers. If they wanted these powers to contribute to the Sacred Universe Alliance, they had to be given positions. The higher the position, the more resources they would receive. Murong Yu had learned about the Sacred Cosmos Alliance from old ancestor Hun Yi, who was also his second avatar. In fact, Murong Yu had Elder Hun Yi, the vice leader, as his backer, so he could do well in the Sacred Universe Alliance. However, he didn't want to rely on this relationship. That wouldn't do him or Shenzhen any good. After half a day, Murong Yu left the Soul Tribe and returned to Shenzhen. Let me know immediately if there's any news. After returning to Shenzhen, the 8 million people in the two armies had already gathered. At the same time, they also knew that they were about to go to the battlefield. Murong Yu slowly looked over. Among these people, some had excited looks on their faces, while others had no change in expression. They all had different expressions. However, to Murong Yu's relief, none of them showed any fear. Without saying anything, Murong Yu took these 8 million people, along with Murong Xian, Duanmu Qing, and the others, into the Hichu Luoshu. Walala. Just as Murong Xian and the others entered the Hichu Luoshu, various magic treasures and vitality treasures fell from the sky and landed in front of everyone. A few million of them. Each of the vitality treasures and magic treasures emitted powerful auras. Just by looking at them, one could tell that they were extremely precious and powerful. Are these all for us? The 8 million people looked at the floating vitality treasures and magic treasures. Everyone's breathing was almost stagnant. Murong Yu's trip to the Soul Race this time was not just to scout for information about the Sacred Universe Alliance, but to obtain treasures. Although the equipment of the 8 million people in the two armies was not bad, it was only on the basis of Shenzhen. Compared to the soul race and other powers, it was nothing. Hence, this time, Murong directly went to the soul race to obtain 8 million high-level vitality treasures and magic treasures. All of them were selfless realm-level vitality treasures. Everyone, pick one that suits you and then quickly refine it. Then, quickly refine them. Before Murong could finish speaking, the soldiers of the two legions had already started choosing their origin tools and treasures. Although there were many people, everyone was more excited. However, as expected of Shenzhen's two armies, there was no chaos or clamor. On the contrary, it looked like a well-ordered well. After every warrior chose a suitable vitality treasure and magic treasure, they consciously went to the side to refine it. Chapter 2206. Time Acceleration. Murong directly activated Hichu Luoshu's time acceleration ability to the maximum. Just like that, an instant passed in the outside world, but 10,000 years had already passed in the He2 and the Luoshu. This was extremely beneficial to the people of the two armies. It could allow them to refine their elemental treasures and magic treasures in the shortest amount of time. It could even allow them to raise their cultivation by a few small realms or even a few large realms. Of course, this was excluding the 8 million people of the two armies. The 500 million Shenzhen disciples who had joined the army were also brought into Hichu Luoshu by Murong to raise their cultivation. Unfortunately, Hichu Luoshu's cultivation level was already very high. The elemental energy of heaven and earth inside was also very high. However, it wasn't a cave or Dao residence. Therefore, the elemental energy of heaven and earth in Hichu Luoshu was only suitable for the 500 million disciples. However, it wasn't suitable for the soldiers of the two armies. This was because the soldiers of the two armies were generally of higher realms. They were among the disciples of Shenzhen with the highest realms. However, Murong was already prepared. When he was in the soul race, not only did he obtain 8 million elemental treasures and magic treasures, he also obtained many elemental crystals and elemental veins from the soul race's treasury. With the support of these elemental crystals and elemental veins, the disciples of the two armies rapidly raised their realms. While Murong was sharpening his spear at the last minute and raising the realms of the Shenzhen disciples, the remaining 500 million soldiers had already been recruited. These people all joined the army for resources. This was because joining the Sacred Cosmos Alliance and becoming a soldier of the Alliance meant that they would be paid. And the pay naturally referred to all sorts of resources. This time, the Sacred Cosmos Alliance treated the soldiers extremely well. After all, everyone was fighting for their own universe. Furthermore, the higher-ups of the Alliance all knew this. Although the ordinary soldiers weren't very strong, and a considerable portion of them were just cannon fodder. However, they were also very useful. If there weren't enough resources for them, who would be willing to contribute? This time, the ordinary soldiers of the Alliance were treated even better than the disciples of some powers. Therefore, apart from the lone cultivators, there were also many disciples of medium and large powers who joined the army. The rogue cultivators joined the army because they saw the soldiers pay. As for the disciples of the large factions, they wanted to establish themselves in the Alliance. After all, if he made a name for himself in the Alliance, then he would be able to shine brightly and have a meteoric rise. It was better than staying in a small place for the rest of his life. The emissary gave Murong 100 years. In the 50th year, Murong brought the two legions and the other 500 million disciples from Hichu Luoshu back to Shenzhen. 50 years. Thanks to Hichu Luoshu's time acceleration, many epochs had passed. The people of the two legions were all extremely talented people. In fact, the remaining 500 million disciples all had superior aptitudes. Therefore, in the span of several epochs, their cultivation levels had increased tremendously. Realm of True Self. Most of them were experts of the realm of True Self. Moreover, under Murong's training, These people had terrifying combat strength that could kill enemies 2 or 3 minor realms above them. Especially the warriors of the 2 legions. Each of them had terrifying combat strength that surpassed their own by 5 minor realms. Of course, the improvement of these people was still considered small. The ones who improved the most were Murong Xian, Zhang Ao, Zhao Jiqing, and the others. They were all at the peak of the selfless realm. However, it was not so easy to break through to the Great Tao realm. Otherwise, the Holy Universe would not only have so few Great Tao realm experts after so many years. Even Murong Yu's cultivation had increased by a few small realms, and he was still at the peak of the Heaven realm. When he was at the 5th level of the Heaven realm, Murong Yu's combat strength had already reached the 5th level of initial Tao realm. And now, his combat strength had already reached the peak of initial Tao realm. His combat strength was quite terrifying. If he slashed out with a Chaos Blade, low-level Tao lords would not be able to resist at all and would be killed by him. Moreover, his soul and power vortex had already fused with 100,000 vortexes. Although the gap between the peak of initial Tao realm and the first level of Tao Lord was like heaven and earth. However, Murong Yu believed that if he did not use the Chaos Blade, even a first level of Tao Lord would not be able to block his punch. If combined with his soul attack, he could even kill a first level of Tao Lord with his bare hands. One had to know that his 10,000 layers of soul waves could already blast out 3,000 layers of soul waves. It was incomparably terrifying. This was not because Murong Yu felt good about himself, but because he had competed with his Tao Lord realm slave. This level of combat power shocked all of the Tao Lords present. On the Shenzhen Square, 1 billion cultivators stood upright. Although there were 1 billion people, the square was silent. Murong Yu stood on a temporarily built platform in front of the square and slowly swept his gaze across the faces of the 1 billion people. The many cultivators in Shenzhen were naturally very familiar with this holy master. Therefore, there was nothing strange about it. However, the 500 million rogue cultivators and disciples of other forces who had come to Shenzhen because they had joined the army were all looking at Murong Yu with blazing eyes. They all knew that although Murong Yu was only a heaven realm cultivator, his true combat strength was extremely terrifying. Of course, Murong Yu's personal strength did not make their eyes burn with passion or even admiration. What made them admire him was that Murong Yu had defeated Highest Mountain, Major Success Temple, and so on with just the strength of a Heaven Realm cultivator and replaced them. With the strength of a Heaven Realm cultivator, he had conquered such a large territory and brought Shenzhen to greater heights. In Shenzhen, Murong Yu was a godlike existence that countless people looked up to and worshipped. It could even be said that these people joined the army because of the alliance's salary and contributions. It would be better to say that it was because of Murong Yu. In fact, in Shenzhen, many rogue cultivators and even people from other forces wanted to join Shenzhen and become Shenzhen's disciples. However, it was a pity that Glory Sect rarely took in disciples. Even when they recruited disciples, they recruited very few people, and the examination was very strict. Therefore, many people who wanted to join Shenzhen were unable to do so. Therefore, this time, with Murong Yu personally leading the team, many people joined the army without hesitation. This was because they could all fight together with Murong Yu, the hero in their hearts. Perhaps if they performed well, they would be accepted into Shenzhen by Murong Yu in the end, or even be accepted as a disciple. Therefore, in an extremely short period of time, Zhang Ao had already recruited 500 million people. If it were not for the quota limit, Zhang Ao would definitely be able to recruit 5 billion, 50 billion, or even more. This time, we are facing the Martial Path universe and the God universe, whose comprehensive strength is stronger than our sacred universe, especially the God universe. Their universe is facing destruction, so all of them will fight with their lives on the line. War. Perhaps you have not experienced it. War is a killing machine. If 1 billion of us go, I'm afraid only a few of us will be able to return. It's even possible that all of us will be wiped out. So, let me ask you again, Are you really willing to join the army? After slowly glancing at everyone, Muronyu lowered his voice and said in a deep voice, "Yes, we are all willing." Everyone answered in unison, and no one flinched. Presumably, these people who could stand here were all strong-willed people who would not change their minds easily. This made Muronyu a little surprised, but his mood became even heavier. It was just as he had said. Perhaps, after a great battle, these people would be completely annihilated. Very good. I can't guarantee anything. But I will always fight with you, and we will live and die together. At the same time, I have to reiterate that I am your great commander, and you can only listen to me. Other than me, even the Alliance leader's orders can't command you. We only listen to your orders, great commander. The billion people roared in unison, and their voices shook the sky. The reason why Muronyu reiterated this point was that he did not want these people to listen to others and die an unnatural death in the end. Moreover, only with absolute obedience could Muronyu lead them to a new world. Good, let's go to the Infinite Palace, Muronyu roared. Immediately after, the 1 billion experts majestically passed through the transfer array and flew towards the Infinite Palace. Jiqing, you guys guard Shenzhen. If anything happens, remember to inform me immediately. I will leave 30 great Dao Realm experts for you guys. Before leaving, Muronyu said to Zhao Jiqing and the other girls. Muronyu could feel that many things would definitely happen in the Alliance this time. Therefore, he only brought half of the great Dao Realm slaves. The remaining half would assist Zhao Jiqing to guard Shenzhen. After all, Shenzhen was his base camp. As for the matter of the great Dao Realm slaves, Zhao Jiqing, Muronyu Xian, Zhang Ao, and the other core upper echelons of Shenzhen had already been informed. Therefore, Zhao Jiqing was not shocked or puzzled. She only said, "You guys have to be careful too, making contributions, charging and breaking through enemy lines, and so on are all fleeting. Only your own life is the most precious. Don't forget that we are still worried about you guys." Zhao Jiqing said this because she understood Murongyu's character very well. This guy was very hardworking when he did things. Muronyu smiled. "Don't worry, with my wife waiting for me at home, how can I bear to die? Moreover, whether the great battle can start is still a problem. Right now, I'm just being prepared. Just be careful." Kurlon glared at Muronyu. Muronyu nodded. After taking a deep look at Zhao, Jiqing, and the other girls, he stepped into the teleportation formation and disappeared from their sight. The Infinite Palace was very far away from Shenzhen. It was impossible to directly teleport over. Therefore, Muronyu could only teleport to the periphery of Shenzhen through Shenzhen's teleportation formation. Then, he entered the territories of other factions and continuously teleported through the other factions' teleportation formations. However, when Muronyu and the others entered the 100 Battles sect, they encountered trouble. They were blocked by a group of great Dao Realm experts from the 100 Battles sect. Chapter 2207. I opened this road, I planted this tree. If you want to pass through, pay the toll. Dozens of 100 Battles sect powerhouses blocked the path of Muronyu and the others. One of the 100 Battles sect elders looked coldly at Shenzhen's 1 billion army. Hearing the 100 Battles sect elder's words, Muronyu almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Since when did the 100 Battles sect become bandits who cut the path? They had actually started to openly rob the belongings of passers-by. Friends of the 100 Battles sect, we are soldiers of the Sacred Cosmos Alliance. We will pass by the 100 Battles sect on our way to the Alliance. Please let us pass. Muronyu didn't appear, but Murong Xian did. However, even though Murong Xian was furious, he remained polite on the surface, and no one could tell that he was angry. He gave enough face to the 100 Battles sect. I don't care who you are. If you pass by the 100 Battles sect, you have to pay. Otherwise, go back to where you came from. A selfless realm cultivator from the 100 Battles sect shouted impatiently. He looked like he was about to make a move. The Sacred Cosmos Alliance has a rule that all members of the Alliance can use the teleportation formation for free. We only need to pay for our own teleportation crystals. Murong Xian's face darkened, and his voice was cold. Are you deaf or blind? Didn't you hear me? 1 billion people. Pay 1,000 crystals per person, and we will allow you to pass through the 100 Battles sect. Otherwise, scram. The selfless realm cultivator who spoke earlier shouted. Murong Xian, Zhang Ao, and the others were furious. If it wasn't for their strength being inferior, they would have attacked long ago. 1,000 crystals per person didn't seem much, but 1 billion disciples was 1 trillion. Moreover, this 1 trillion was given to the 100 Battles sect for free. If they wanted to use the teleportation formation, they had to pay their own crystals to activate it. You're going too far. Zhang Ao was furious. So what if you're bullying? Your glory sect can choose not to give it to me. However, if you can't reach the Myriad Palace within 100 years, you can wait for the punishment of the Myriad Palace. I think you don't have much time left from the 100-year time limit, right? The 100 Battles sect's selfless realm cultivator said with a sneer. In the crowd, Murong, you couldn't help being stunned. They didn't even say that they were Shengzhen's men, okay? How did these people from the 100 Battles sect know? Since they knew that they were Shengzhen, why did they still stop them? One must know that when Murong Yu came to the 100 Battles sect, the 100 Battles sect did not dare to be rude to him directly. There must be something strange about this. As Murong Yu's gaze swept across the 100 Battles sect's group, he suddenly came to a realization. There was a familiar face in the crowd regarding this matter. It wasn't Bai Hong, nor was it someone from the 100 Battles sect. Instead, it was a cultivator that he had met in Shenzhen before, a person who had followed the so-called messenger to Shenzhen to recruit soldiers. I was wondering when the 100 Battles sect became so audacious. So many great Virtue Realm experts died in Shattered Stars Gorge, yet they're still so arrogant. So they have the support of the Alliance messenger. Murong Yu sneered in his heart. He already had a plan. A good dog doesn't block the way. Murong Xian, Zhang Ao, leave immediately. If anyone blocks the way again, just kill them. So what if the other party had the support of the Alliance messenger? Murong Yu still had the Alliance master support? Who was he afraid of? Moreover, even without old ancestor Hun, Murong Yu was not afraid of anyone. If the 100 Battles sect dared to make a move, then let's see who was stronger. Murong Yu sneered in his heart. On the other side, Murong Xian and Zhang Ao had received the order and were about to lead the army away. Boom! The initial Dao expert from the 100 Battles sect suddenly erupted with a terrifying aura. The terrifying aura swept over like a stormy sea, instantly striking Murong Xian, Zhang Ao, and Shengzhen's disciples and forcing them to retreat. Whoever dares to take half a step forward, I'll make sure they don't return. Everyone, listen to the order. If Shengzhen continues to move forward, kill him without mercy. The 100 Battles sect elder roared angrily. When the 100 Battles sect experts received the order, they all erupted with terrifying killing intent and looked at Shengzhen's group with murderous intent. Murong Xian, Zhang Ao, and the others' expressions were extremely ugly. The anger in their hearts was about to burn through the ninth heaven. 100 Battles sect, how impressive! Murong Yu stepped out from the crowd with a cold expression. At this time, he had no choice but to appear. Sect Master Shengzhen? The moment they saw Murong Yu, the expressions of the 100 Battles sect elder and the person beside the Alliance messenger changed slightly. At the same time, Murong Yu already felt a strong, killing intent locking onto him. These people's target was him. Murong Yu sneered in his heart. The Alliance messenger was too vengeful. He hadn't even reached the Alliance messenger, and he couldn't help but make a move. However, could it be that he thought that a mere 100 Battles sect was enough to deal with him? Did he overestimate the 100 Battles sect or underestimate Shengzhen? Murong Yu, leave behind 10 trillion crystals. You can pass by the 100 Battles sect. Otherwise, we can only ask you to go back. The 100 Battles sect elder sneered. Murong Yu smiled, and his smile was very cold. I think the crystals aren't your main goal, right? If I'm not wrong, your target is me. Killing me is your goal. isn't it? Heh, I didn't expect the dignified Hundred Battles sect to become the Alliance Messenger's dog. The Alliance Messenger's dog? This time, Shenzhen's disciples finally understood why the Hundred Battles sect wanted to be thieves for no reason. Their goal wasn't to cut the path. Their goal was to kill Murongyu. The Hundred Battles sect elder's expression suddenly changed. Just as he was about to say something, the initial Dao powerhouse beside the Alliance messenger stepped forward. Since Sect Master Shenzhen is so smart to know our intentions, then let's talk. Then let's not beat around the bush. That's right, our goal is you. And not just you, but your 1 billion army, and even the entire Shenzhen. Bai Hong, if you don't come out now, when will you? Murong Xian, Zhang Ao, and the others' expressions suddenly changed. At this time, a flickering army appeared around them out of thin air. Murongyu glanced around and found that the Hundred Battles sect had put in a lot of effort this time. They were determined to kill him and Shenzhen. There were at least 2 billion soldiers. In addition to these 2 billion soldiers, there were dozens of initial Dao and Dao Lord powerhouses. If it was before, this strength would definitely be able to crush Murongyu. Even if Murongyu had great divine abilities, it was impossible for him to kill his way out of this encirclement. But now, Murongyu's expression didn't change at all, although the Hundred Battles sect had many cultivators. In terms of ordinary disciples, their combat strength might not be stronger than Shenzhen's. In fact, Murongyu could see that the strength of the 2 billion soldiers of the Hundred Battles sect was even more uneven. Although the Hundred Battles sect was superior to Shenzhen in terms of great Daorel powerhouses, but in terms of ordinary disciples, they were about the same. Moreover, Murongyu still had his trump card army. Glancing at Shenzhen's 1 billion soldiers, a small portion of the crowd revealed fear. But more of them were filled with fighting spirit. Especially the 8 million soldiers of the 2 armies. They were even more expressionless. These guys were all warmongers. Murongyu nodded to himself. If they were afraid before the battle, then they would know who would win without even fighting. Defend. Prepare to attack. Almost at the same time, Murong Xian and Jia Shui roared at the same time. Immediately, the 1 billion soldiers began to slowly shrink their formation. Each of them took out their respective origin chi or dharma treasures and got into a defensive posture. Meanwhile, the 8 million soldiers of the Sacred Guardian Army and the Chaos Army stepped out and blocked the flanks of the 1 billion soldiers. As long as Murong Xian, Jia Shui, or Murongyu gave the order, the soldiers of the 2 armies would quickly attack and kill the most enemies in the shortest time. Kill them. After the 2 billion soldiers of the Hundred Battles sect appeared, Bai Hong roared. At the same time, he reached out his hand and slapped Murongyu across the air. Kill! Murongyu roared. Immediately, Shenzhen's 1 billion soldiers attacked at the same time. Each of them locked onto the enemies not far away and blasted out their strongest attacks. At the same time, Murongyu and the 30 great Dao Realm elites that he brought with him also attacked. Each of them locked onto a great Dao Realm elite and directly charged over. Boom, boom, boom. In the blink of an eye, the great Dao Realm experts clashed against each other, erupting out with a series of loud sounds. However, after all, the people nearby were their own people. Hence, the great Dao Realm elites from both sides only attacked probingly and did not attack with full force. Otherwise, just the repercussions of the power that escaped from them would take the lives of Shenzhen and the 3 billion soldiers of the Hundred Battles sect. While everyone was exchanging blows, Murongyu's movements were not slow either. In fact, he was the fastest to attack among all of them. The chaos blade in his hand burst out with a terrifying power of chaos and soul suppression. Murongyu executed the army formula, and his figure instantly disappeared on the spot. When he reappeared, he was already in front of that initial Dao Realm subordinate of the Alliance envoy. The chaos blade in his hand burst out with terrifying power, and with a raise of his hand, a huge head flew up. Murongyu's current combat strength had already reached the peak of initial Dao Realm. Even if he attacked barehanded, that initial Dao Realm elite could not resist at all. Moreover, he was attacking with a Chaos Blade. Hence, with one attack, he directly cut off that initial Tao Realm Elite's head. Soul Storm. At the same time, Muronyu had already blasted out a soul attack from both sides. Now that many people already knew about the existence of the soul race, Muronyu did not need to continue hiding his identity. Poof, poof, poof. Just as Muronyu cut off that initial Tao Realm Elite's head, the souls of dozens of 100 Battles sect cultivators near him were also crushed by Muronyu, and they died instantly. Among them, that initial Tao Realm Elder of the 100 Battles sect was included. Rumble. At the same time as the top elites attacked, Shenzhen and the 3 billion soldiers of the 100 Battles sect also attacked. As soon as they attacked, the difference in strength between the two sides was obvious. Chapter 2208. Although the 100 Battles sect had 1 billion more disciples than Shenzhen, these disciples' cultivations were uneven. In fact, although they surrounded Shenzhen's many warriors, they did not even have a formation. It was very messy. Looking at Shenzhen's side, there was a huge gap between 100 Battles sect and Shenzhen. Apart from the two legions, the remaining 1 billion cultivators. Among them, the 500 million Shenzhen's disciples were not a regular army, but they did not panic in the face of danger. Under the command of Zhang Ao and the others, they maintained a complete formation. Most importantly, each of Shenzhen's disciples had experienced blood, fighting with enemies, fighting with ferocious beasts. This was the reason why their strength increased so quickly. It could be said that each of Shenzhen's disciples had a lot of combat experience. As for the remaining 500 million people, most of them were rogue cultivators. What was a rogue cultivator? A rogue cultivator was a cultivator who had no power and could only wander in the endless starry sky. The living environment of these people was extremely cruel. There were all kinds of fights for resources, all kinds of vendettas, and all kinds of fights with ferocious beasts. It could be said that their combat experience was much better than Shenzhen's ordinary disciples. Most importantly, surviving in all kinds of cruel environments. Each of them was a cultivator who had experienced hundreds of battles and killed countless people. Apart from the rogue cultivators, the rest were all elites of the major forces, although they were slightly inferior to Shenzhen and those rogue cultivators. But because they did not have many people, they did not affect Shenzhen's formation. On the other hand, the 100 Battles sect did not have enough combat experience and did not have a formation. So, after the first round of bombardment, the 100 Battles sect suffered heavy losses. Tens of millions of people were directly killed by Shenzhen's side, and the power of the 100 Battles sect's bombardment was blocked by Shenzhen's soldiers. Although some unlucky people were seriously injured by the bombardment, but no one was killed. This was the difference. As soon as they came into contact, 1/20th of the people were gone. This shocked the people of the 100 Battles sect who had no order. All of their faces were filled with shock. They were probably scared out of their wits. At the same time, the deaths of the Alliance emissary and the 100 Battles sect elder had dealt a heavy blow to the morale of the 100 Battles sect. However, Shenzhen's side was in high spirits. Coupled with the 100 Battles sect's ambush, Shenzhen's disciples had long suppressed a bellyful of anger. At this moment, all of this anger was vented out. 2 legions, 8 battle teams attack. Kill these bastards for me. Murong Shen roared. Following which, under the leadership of the 8 commanders, the 8 battle teams charged out from Shenzhen's formation like sharp knives, charging in 8 different directions. 8 battle teams, 8 million well-trained true self-realm experts who all had top origin treasures. After these people attacked, they exploded with power that made the people of the 100 Battles sect tremble. Block them, kill them for me. In front of the Azure Dragon battle team, a 100 Battles sect expert who had reached the peak of the selfless realm and was only 1 step away from the initial Tao realm looked at the Azure Dragon battle team, charging over like a flood, and roared madly. Kill him for me. Azure Dragon battle team's commander, Yu Jia, roared. Before Yu Jia's voice fell, the 100,000 warriors of the Azure Dragon battle team immediately locked onto the 100 Battles Sex peak of the Selfless Realm Cultivator and blasted out their strongest attack. The 100 Battles Sex peak of the Selfless Realm Cultivator was so shocked that his face turned pale. Even his body couldn't help but tremble violently. However, he was a peak of the Selfless Realm Cultivator after all. Although he was terrified, he still reacted in time. He quickly retreated backward. However, it was already too late. The concentrated fire of 100,000 people had already blasted down. Rumble. Earth-shattering noises kept coming out, shattering the sky. The 100 Battles Sex peak of the Selfless Realm didn't even have the chance to scream before he was blasted into smithereens. Even hundreds of thousands of 100 Battles Sex cultivators near him were also torn into smithereens. On the other side, even though the Azure Dragon battle team attacked, their speed didn't stop for a moment. He only launched an attack and continued to fly forward. During this process, terrifying forces were constantly blasted out by them. All kinds of vitality weapons and magic treasures emitted dazzling lights and bombarded the 100 Battles Sex formation. Facing such a brave Azure Dragon battle team, the 100 Battles Sect had long been scared out of their wits. One by one, they retreated backward with a horrified expression. They couldn't resist. Poof, poof, poof. Wherever the Azure Dragon battle team passed, they were like a harvester, constantly reaping the lives of the 100 Battles Sect disciples. They were simply unstoppable. In just a few breaths' time, the Azure Dragon battle team had already charged into the 100 Battles Sect crowd and even broke out of their encirclement, arriving behind them. Kill. Charge back again and kill all these 100 Battles Sect bastards. Yu Jia roared with murderous intent and led the 1 million Azure Dragon battle team warriors to charge back again. Thus, another massacre began. Other than the Azure Dragon battle team, the White Tiger battle team, Black Tortoise battle team, Vermilion Burr battle team, Heaven battle team, Earth battle team, Qin battle team, and Kuan battle team were all so valiant. Killing his way into the 100 Battles Sex army was like entering an unstoppable realm. They charged back and forth in the crowd, killing their way in and out. The cultivators of the 100 Battles Sect immediately crumbled in the face of such a terrifying opponent and two terrifying legions. They no longer had the intention to kill their enemies. All of them turned around and fled in all directions. Kill. Don't leave a single one alive. Murong Xian erupted with peak selfless realm strength, moving unhindered among the 100 Battles Sect disciples. Wherever it passed, a large number of 100 Battles Sect disciples fell. At the same time, Shenzhen's 1 billion soldiers also launched their strongest attack. The 100 Battles Sect had already been defeated. How could they resist Shenzhen's tiger-like soldiers? As a result, all of them became targets for slaughter. Almost every moment, a large number of 100 Battles Sect disciples would fall. The battle losses were very serious. Almost at the beginning, hundreds of millions of people had already fallen on the 100 Battles Sect side. In a battle of this level, there were too many people and too strong. Therefore, the casualties were also very terrifying. However, in the battle between universes, the current battle paled in comparison to the one between universes. In a battle between universes, the number of people each time was in the trillions. Once one side was defeated, even more cultivators would die. The 100 Battles Sect could not withstand a single blow. Seeing this scene, the hearts of Bai Hong and the others were about to break. Although the 100 Battles Sect had many disciples, if hundreds of millions of them died, no matter how many disciples there were, they would not be able to withstand the exhaustion. They wanted to help, but they were held back by Shenzhen's great Dao realm experts. They could not help. In fact, they could not even find the time to slap down with their palms. Swoosh! After Murong Yu instantly slew 2 elementary-level Grand Dao experts, he took a single step forward and teleported next to an early-stage Dao Lord Elder of the 100 Battles Sect. This 100 Battles Sect Elder was being bombarded by Murong Yu's Dao Lord Realm expert and could not fight back at all. Without saying anything, Murong Yu unleashed his strongest attack. The blade of chaos in his hand slashed out rapidly. Immediately, this Dao Lord expert's face revealed a look of shock. An extremely strong aura of death enveloped his entire heart. Run. Murong Yu's attack could definitely kill him. Therefore, this 100 Battles sect elder made the right reaction. However, although he made the right reaction, could he really escape? Just as he was about to escape, the power in his body became chaotic. He, who originally wanted to retreat, actually stopped in place and did not move at all. At the same time, his soul felt drowsy, as if he was about to enter a deep sleep. In a battle between experts, even if there was only a 1/100th of an instant of error, the final outcome would be reversed. Swoosh! His hand rose, and the blade fell. The Dowlord didn't even have a chance to scream before he was chopped in half. At the same time, when his body was cut in half, his soul had already been minced by the blade of chaos. He could not be more dead. Kill. After killing the Dowlord expert, Murong Yu and the Dowlord slave glanced at each other, then simultaneously charged toward another nearby Dowlord expert of the 100 Battles sect. This Dowlord expert was locked in a fierce battle with his opponent, and neither could do anything to the other. However, when he saw Murong Yu and the other person pouncing over with murderous intent, he had a thought and wanted to retreat. However, although Shengzhen's expert could not do anything to him, it was not a problem for him to stall him for a short period of time. Therefore, this expert also suffered a tragedy. 2 Dowlords in addition to Murong Yu, who had the Chaos Blade and was capable of slaying Dowlords. He was doomed. Especially Murong Yu's Blade of Chaos, which constantly erupted with the power of chaos and the power of soul suppression, greatly weakened the strength of this 100 Battles sect Dowlord expert. In the end, not long after, his head and soul were blasted apart by Shengzhen's Dowlord expert with a single punch. He was killed. At this point, 100 Battles sect had already lost 4 great Dao realm experts. 4 great Dao realm experts, even for 100 Battles sect, was a huge loss. Retreat. All of you retreat. Bai Hong roared crazily. He did not expect Shengzhen to have so many great Dao realm experts. Kill them. Don't leave a single one alive. Murong Yu's expression was cold. Since 100 Battles sect dared to ambush them, they had to pay the price in blood. Therefore, the great Dao realm experts on Shengzhen's side frantically entangled their opponents, preventing them from leaving for a short period of time. As for Murong Yu, he led the 2 Dao Lords and launched a frenzied attack. Basically, the great Dao realm experts that were targeted by him could only die, being targeted by 3 great Dao realm experts. In addition to Murong Yu, these great Dao realm experts of 100 Battles sect could not resist at all. Moreover, wherever Murong Yu and the others passed, they killed a large number of ordinary disciples of 100 Battles sect. They did not have the demeanor of an expert at all. However, this was war. The more people died on 100 Battles sect side, the fewer people died on Shengzhen's side. Therefore, Murong Yu and the others did not care about their status at all and attacked the ordinary disciples of 100 Battles sect. Chapter 2209. In a battle between experts, the 100 Battles sect was inferior to Shengzhen. At the same time, in the battle between ordinary soldiers, the 100 Battles sect was also at a disadvantage. Therefore, in less than an hour after the battle, the 100 Battles sect was defeated. Even Bai Hong and the others had to flee in defeat. However, how could Murong Yu let them off so easily? Murong Yu never took the initiative to cause trouble, but it did not mean that he was a tolerant person. If I don't provoke others, they won't provoke me. Since the 100 Battles sect took the initiative to ambush Shengzhen, and since they were willing to become the Alliance envoy's dog, then he would kill them all. Therefore, Shengzhen's side suppressed their anger and launched a crazy pursuit. A large number of 100 Battles sect cultivators died, especially at the level of great Dao realm experts. With the cooperation of Murong Yu and the others, more than 20 great Dao realm experts of the 100 Battles sect were almost all killed. In the end, only Bai Hong and another peak initial Dao realm expert escaped. The remaining 20 or so people all died in battle. It could be said that the losses were heavy. Apart from the peak combat strength, The ordinary disciples of the Hundred Battles sect were almost all dead. 2 billion experts ambushed Shenzhen with murderous intent, but in the end, only less than 10 million disciples fled in panic. In other words, in this battle, Shenzhen killed more than 99 billion cultivators of the Hundred Battles sect. It could be said that the Hundred Battles sect was completely wiped out this time. On the other hand, although many people were injured on Shenzhen's side, however, less than 100,000 people had perished. Moreover, these were all itinerant cultivators who joined the army and disciples of other factions. None of Shenzhen's disciples died. From this battle, Shenzhen's strength could be seen. After returning from the pursuit, Shenzhen's 1 billion soldiers all had smiles on their faces. Although some of them were friends or relatives of tens of thousands of people who died, these people died bravely in the battle. They died honorably. Therefore, these people were not too sad. Moreover, they all knew about it. This time, Shenzhen won a complete victory. However, their opponent was only the Hundred Battles sect. Although the Hundred Battles sect appeared to be much stronger than Shenzhen on the surface, in reality, the Hundred Battles sect was not that powerful. If they had encountered a stronger force, or even in a war between universes, they would not have suffered so little damage. Anyway, everyone was prepared to die. Of course, not everyone could disregard life and death. They were only mentally prepared to die. Pick up any origin tools or magic treasures. Morong ordered. The 1 billion cultivators immediately began to pick up the treasures with smiles on their faces. After all, 2 billion Hundred Battles sect cultivators were killed. After they died, all kinds of treasures that belonged to them, including spatial treasures, were dropped. Naturally, it became the spoils of war for Shenzhen and the others. Moreover, almost 2 billion Hundred Battles sect cultivators had died in battle. On the other hand, Shenzhen only had 1 billion. Basically, each of them obtained more than 2 treasures on average. In fact, some people with fast hands even obtained more than 1 spatial treasure. Murong Xian, who was standing beside Morong Yu, indifferently said, "Although war is bitter, it's the best way to raise one's cultivation and obtain treasures and resources." Looking at the smiling army of 1 billion soldiers, Murong Xian stood beside Morong Yu. Morong Yu nodded slightly. After this round of battle, Shenzhen's 1 billion army already had a preliminary cooperation. In a war between armies, the most important thing was to fight in cooperation. Otherwise, even if you were brave and invincible, if you were surrounded by an army, you would probably die on the spot. The difference in strength between the two sides was really too big. Just like how the Azure Dragon squad killed the Hundred Battles sect cultivator who was at the peak of the Selfless realm. The 100,000 people in the Azure Dragon squad were all true Self-realm cultivators, and there was a gap of a whole realm between them and the other party. However, didn't they easily blast the other party into pieces? In addition to the cooperation, Murong Yu saw that everyone's aura was more solid. The more solid their aura was, the more stable their cultivation was. And the better their foundation, the faster their cultivation would improve. Moreover, the war could also sharpen their temperament. He ordered everyone to stay where they were. Thus, some people in the 1 billion army sat cross-legged on the spot and began to heal their injuries. Some people began to refine the origin weapons or magic treasures among the spoils of war. As for Murong Yu and the other higher-ups, they gathered together. Duan Muqing looked at Murong Yu and asked, "Sacred Lord, what do we plan to do now?" He looked at Duan Muqing, then at Murong Xian, Zhang Ao, and the others. Murong Yu smiled. "I think you already have a plan, right? Go ahead, tell me your next plan. If it's feasible, I'll listen to you." Duan Muqing and the others looked at each other, and then Jia Shui said in a low voice, "The Hundred Battles sect ambushed us because of that alliance emissary. With that idiot's vengeful personality, if he failed to use the Hundred Battles sect this time, there will definitely be a second or even a third time. In fact, even if we reach the Infinite Palace, I'm afraid that this idiot will still stir up trouble. He won't let us have peace, so..." Morong Yu was shocked. "So, you plan to kill that alliance emissary?" Young man couldn't help but laugh. Sacred Lord, don't pretend to be shocked. Even if we really kill that Alliance emissary, you won't change your expression, right? You'll only clap your hands and say good. Morong Yu embarrassedly smiled. You guys found out. Jia Shui, continue. So, while the 100 Battles sect is defeated and their morale is low, we should go straight ahead and destroy them in one fell swoop. As long as we destroy the 100 Battles sect, we can show our might. At that time, even if we reach the Infinite Palace, the Alliance emissary will be wary of us. Morong Yu nodded slightly. To put it bluntly, Joshua's plan was to make an example out of them, and the pitiful 100 Battles sect just happened to become the chicken to be slaughtered. Moreover, the 100 Battles sect lost more than 20 great Dao Realm experts in this battle, including the great Dao Realm experts who died in the Shattered Star Gorge. But the 100 Battles sect's high-end combat power was far inferior to Shenzhen's. If Shenzhen launched a surprise attack now, they might really be able to wipe out the 100 Battles sect from the boundless starry sky. In that case, let's wipe out the 100 Battles sect. Morong Yu said murderously. This matter was instigated by the 100 Battles sect, if not for Morong Yu's ability. Otherwise, Shenzhen's 1 billion disciples would have become cold corpses long ago. Even the entire Shenzhen would be razed to the ground by the 100 Battles sect. If they destroyed the 100 Battles sect, they would only have themselves to blame. Therefore, Shenzhen's 1 billion army marched toward the 100 Battles sect. They rushed over as fast as they could. Moreover, the 100 Battles sect's army was constantly passing through the territory. Therefore, even if someone encountered Shenzhen's 1 billion army, no one would suspect anything. Therefore, when Morong Yu and the others arrived near the 100 Battles sect's mountain gate, the 100 Battles sect still didn't know what was going on. No one defended at all, and the mountain gate was wide open. At this moment, in the 100 Battles sect's main hall, the Alliance envoy was throwing a tantrum and scolding Bai Hong and the others. This time, the 100 Battles sect suffered heavy losses because of this Alliance envoy. Bai Hong was also furious, but at this moment, he lowered his head and allowed the Alliance envoy to scold him. He had no choice, although he was stronger than the Alliance envoy. But the other party had a strong background. Even if he was 100 times stronger, he wouldn't dare to touch the Alliance envoy. He didn't dare to offend him at all. Otherwise, the Alliance envoy could easily destroy the greatly weakened 100 Battles sect. With Shenzhen's strength, he must have turned out in full force. At this moment, Shenzhen probably doesn't have many people guarding it. Bai Hong, I order you to immediately raise the entire Shenzhen to the ground. Damn it! How dare you offend me? See if I don't kill you. The Alliance envoy's face was ferocious, and his eyes were filled with hatred as he roared. Bai Hong and the others were shocked, but soon after, their faces were filled with hatred and malevolence. Morong Yu killed more than 1 billion of their disciples and more than 20 great virtue realm experts. Even the entire Shenzhen couldn't extinguish the flames of hatred in their hearts. Immediately, Bai Hong accepted the order and was about to bring the 100 Battles sect's experts to kill Shenzhen. But at this moment, waves of roars filled with killing intent came from all directions. Bai Hong and the others were shocked and couldn't react to what was going on. The main hall they were in had been shattered into dust by an extremely terrifying force. Kill them. At the same time as the main hall exploded, Morong Yu's cold voice sounded in Bai Hong and the others' ears. At the same time, the Chaos Blade slashed down with a destructive aura. Huh? Bai Hong and the others were shocked and quickly reacted. However, at this moment, some of the weaker elders suddenly died. In fact, even Bai Hong and the other Dao Lords felt an extremely intense aura of death envelop their hearts. Soul Race Expert. In the end, it was the Alliance envoy who was knowledgeable and cried out in surprise. That's right, before Morong Yu slashed out with the Chaos Blade, he had already used the Soul Storm. With his soul that had fused with at least 100,000 vortexes, ordinary initial Dao experts wouldn't even have time to react before their souls were torn apart. However, Dao Lords were still much stronger. While the Alliance envoy cried out in surprise, Bai Hong and the other Dao Lords had already firmly protected their souls. However, The soul attack was only one of Murong Yu's many attacks. When the Chaos Blade slashed down, the power of chaos and the power of the battle soul swept through the world, causing the world to pale in comparison. The power of Bai Hong and the others was instantly interfered with and began to fall into chaos. At the same time, the great virtue realm experts who came with Murong Yu also unleashed their strongest power and attacked. Chapter 22:10. Their powers were in chaos, and their souls were unconscious. Bai Hong and the others instantly fell into endless danger. However, they were all Tao Lords after all. Although the power of chaos and the power of soul suppression were terrifying, they could not suppress them for long. In a few breaths of time, Bai Hong and the others had already reacted. As their bodies trembled, the power of chaos and the power of soul suppression were shattered. Immediately, they regained control of their powers. However, it was already too late. Bang, bang, bang. The 30 Shenzhen experts on Shenzhen's side came out in full force and attacked. Although Bai Hong and the others reacted quickly, how could they escape in time? In the end, they only had time to take out their respective defensive treasures to block the attacks of Murong Yu and the others. However, under the sneak attack, they could not strengthen their defenses at all. After a series of muffled sounds, the 100 Battles Sect's deputy sect masters and elders were all sent flying like broken rags. They spat out blood in the void. Even though they were in a defensive posture, they were still severely injured. The great Tao realm experts that Murong Yu brought were not easy to deal with. They were all cultivators with rich combat experience. They knew how to maximize their damage. In particular, the envoy of the Alliance was the focus of their attention. A single punch from a Tao Lord had almost caused his body to shatter. At this moment, he was lying on the ground and moaning, looking extremely miserable. Don't leave a single one of them alive. Kill them all. Murong Yu roared. Since he wanted to make a show of strength and make an example of them, then he would do it thoroughly, lest these people take revenge in the future. As he spoke, Murong Yu launched his strongest attack, Holy Soul Slash. He immediately locked onto a heavily injured Tao Lord and unleashed his most powerful soul attack. At the same time as the soul attack, the Blade of Chaos slashed down again. The deputy sect master of the 100 Battles sect was already severely injured. Now that he was being attacked crazily by Murong Yu, he did not even have the time to react before his head was chopped off by Murong Yu and his soul was destroyed. Seeing this scene, Bai Hong, who was also one of the vice-sect leaders of the 100 Battles sect, couldn't help but roar. Although the 100 Battles sect was powerful, they only had a few Tao Lords. One had been killed in the Shattered Stars Gorge, and another had been killed by Murong Yu not long ago. Now, another one was killed by Murong Yu. Aside from the fact that he was no longer the sect master of the 100 Battles sect, he was the only Tao Lord of the 100 Battles sect. Murong Yu, however, had many Tao Lords on his side. They were no match for him at all. Run. His first reaction was to flee. He didn't care about the Alliance messenger anymore. Even if the other party was the leader of the Alliance, he couldn't care less. After all, his own life was more important. Where are you going? Just as Bai Hong's figure swayed, a huge fist had already blasted over and landed heavily on his body. Crack! After a muffled sound, Bai Hong's physical body was directly blown apart. However, Bai Hong's soul was only slightly affected. He continued to flee. Holy Soul Slash. A cold killing intent flashed past the depths of Murong Yu's eyes as he launched a soul attack. Bai Hong wasn't a soul cultivator. In his soul form, he couldn't resist Murong Yu's soul attack at all. Sect Master won't let you off. Bai Hong roared angrily, but in the end his soul was shattered by Murong Yu and he was killed. The few of you, go and suppress the stronger disciples of the 100 Battles sect. If they can't resist, don't kill them. Murong Yu instructed the great Tao realm powerhouses. These great Tao realm powerhouses immediately went out. At this moment, the 100 Battles sect no longer had any great Tao realm powerhouses. Moreover, after Shenzhen forcefully attacked, many disciples died in an instant. when Shenzhen's great Tao realm powerhouse erupted with his great Tao aura. The people of the 100 Battles sect finally stopped fighting. All of them chose to surrender. Hand over your spatial treasures, and you can scram. After gathering all the disciples of the 100 Battles sect who didn't die in the battle in the square of the 100 Battles sect, Murong Xian stepped out, glanced at them, and said coldly. The people of the 100 Battles sect were furious. All of them looked at Murong Xian furiously, but no one handed over their spatial treasures. Murong Xian nodded slightly. Very good. Since you chose the spatial treasures, you don't want your lives anymore? Someone come. Kill all of them. Don't leave a single one alive. After killing them, their spatial treasures, and even their origin items and Dharma treasures that have recognized their masters, will still be ours. As soon as Murong Xian finished speaking, the 4 million warriors of the Sacred Suppression Army erupted with terrifying power. They were about to kill all the disciples of the 100 Battles sect. Looking at the murderous disciples of the Sacred Suppression Army and Shenzhen's other disciples, some of the people of the 100 Battles sect who had crossed temperaments were instantly scared out of their wits. Don't kill me. I'll hand over the treasures. I'll also hand over the Dharma treasures that have recognized me as their master. As he spoke, the person had already flown out and threw the spatial treasures in front of the square. At the same time, he flipped his hand, and 2 origin items and Dharma treasures appeared in his hand. Suddenly, the disciple of the 100 Battles sect spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face immediately became dispirited. I've already removed the ownership of all these treasures. Can you let me go now? You can go now, but you have to be quick, or I can't guarantee when I'll change my mind. After using his divine sense to check, he found that the treasures on the ground had already been removed from their ownership. Therefore, Murong Xian said coldly. The disciple of the 100 Battles sect seemed to have been pardoned. Without saying a word, he suddenly soared into the air and flew out of the 100 Battles sect. In the blink of an eye, he had already disappeared from everyone's sight. Did they really let him go? The people of the 100 Battles sect who had been worried all this time finally relaxed. Then, someone took the initiative to step out, threw down the treasures that had already been removed from their ownership, and quickly left the 100 Battles sect. With the first, there would be a second. More and more people quickly stepped out and then quickly left the 100 Battles sect. In the end, there were only a few loyalists left in the square. These people were still unwilling to surrender, as if they wanted to live and die with the 100 Battles sect. Kill them? Shenzhen never had the tradition of killing captives who had no power to resist. However, the cause of all this was the 100 Battles sect's initiative. As a disciple of the 100 Battles sect, they had to bear the consequences, no matter how serious the consequences were. In the end, Murong Xian ordered these people's cultivation to be destroyed, and after forcibly stripping them of all their treasures, he threw them out of the 100 Battles sect. Looking at the various treasures piled up like a mountain in front of him, Murong rubbed his hands excitedly. Big brother, this is the biggest harvest we've ever had, right? This doesn't include the 100 Battles sect's treasure vault. The others also came over, all beaming with joy. This was all the treasures of all the disciples of the 100 Battles sect. Moreover, it did not include the treasures stored in the space treasure. If they were all piled up together, it would be like a small origin star. Little Xian, how do we divide these treasures? Li Ling rubbed his hands, his eyes twinkling as he chuckled. These guys were all talents who could take charge of their own affairs. However, in the face of this victory and so many treasures, they were like children. Fortunately, Murong Xian still had some of Murong Yu's personality, although he was not as old as Li Ling. However, he was much more mature than Li Ling. Although Li Ling was once Shenzhen's sect leader, to be able to seize these treasures is the credit of all of us. How about this? All these treasures will be put into our shared vault. At the same time, our military pay and rewards for meritorious service will be taken from this vault in the future. You have to believe that we will continue to grow in the future, and there will be more treasures in our vault in the future. I believe that the strength of our team will become stronger and stronger. Okay, actually, everyone had already defeated the 2 billion disciples of the 100 Battles sect and obtained many treasures. More treasures were just icing on the cake to them. They did not need them urgently. It was better to use them as military pay and rewards. This way, everyone would work even harder to kill the enemy in the future, while Murong Xian and the others were dealing with the prisoners of war in the direction of the main hall. Murong Yu used his power to condense a chair and placed it directly in front of the Alliance messenger, who was groaning on the ground. Sitting on the chair, Murong Yu smiled at the Alliance messenger who was pretending to be dead. "Sir Messenger, long time no see. Are you well?" He had already beaten him up to the point where he could not take care of himself, and he still asked if he was well. This was clearly mocking him to his face. The Alliance messenger was not stupid, of course. He could understand the meaning behind Murong Yu's words. However, the situation was not good now. Although he wanted to kill Murong Yu with one punch, he did not have the ability. Therefore, he could only lie on the ground and pretend to be dead. "Sacred Lord, this person is already dead. Why don't you let me punch him to smithereens? This way, the Alliance will not be able to find out who killed him." A Tao Lord beside Murong Yu held back his laughter and said loudly to Murong Yu. The Alliance messenger who was lying on the ground and pretending to be dead could not help but shiver. He immediately raised his head with a confused expression. "What's going on? Why did I faint? Murong Yu, why are you here?" What a blatant lie. A cold light flashed in the depths of Murong Yu's eyes. This Alliance messenger was not only arrogant, but also flexible. Such an enemy was the most terrifying. If Murong Yu let him go just because he pretended to be a fool, there might be even more powerful experts coming tomorrow. Therefore, Murong Yu was determined not to let this guy go so easily. "You had a dispute with the 100 Battles sect's vice-sect leader Bai Hong and others. In the end, you showed your might and directly killed Bai Hong and destroyed the entire 100 Battles sect. I've already reported this matter to the Alliance. However, the 100 Battles sect dared to attack the Alliance messenger because they did not obey the Alliance's orders. Therefore, the Alliance should not pursue the lore messenger's crime. This was also a master who was lying through his teeth. Moreover, he was even more ruthless than the Alliance messenger." When Murong Yu said this, the Alliance messenger could not help but shiver again. Chapter 22:11. The Alliance messenger almost spat out a mouthful of blood. What did he mean by lying through his teeth? What did he mean by playing the blame game? Murong Yu was one of them. Moreover, Murong Yu was even more vicious than him. Originally, the Alliance emissary could rely on his position in the Sacred Cosmos Alliance to easily suppress people like Murong Yu. Just like the 100 Battles sect, he only needed to say one word, and the 100 Battles sect people had no choice but to obey. Otherwise, the Alliance messenger would be able to kill them behind their backs. It could be said that in front of normal powers, the Alliance messenger could cover the sky with one hand. However, this Alliance messenger just had to meet Murong Yu. However, the situation was not good now. Even if Murong Yu said something, the Alliance messenger would not say anything. As long as he could escape, he would have a chance to kill Murong Yu in the future. However, Murong Yu said that he had already reported this matter to the Alliance. This scared the Alliance messenger so much that he peed his pants. The Alliance gave him the task of contacting the various powers and asking them to attack the Alliance. The Alliance messenger only had this bit of power. However, this guy relied on his position to do whatever he wanted. Moreover, just as Murong Yu said, he would become the murderer of the 100 Battles sect. If the Alliance found out, they would immediately remove his identity as the Alliance messenger. In fact, he might even be killed on the spot. Therefore, the Alliance messenger was so scared that he peed his pants. However, on second thought, Murong Yu was only the leader of a small force. He didn't even know where the Alliance was, let alone the upper echelons of the Alliance. How was he supposed to report this matter to his superiors? This guy was just scaring him. Thinking about this, the Alliance messenger could not help but laugh coldly. He immediately stood up from the ground. He looked energetic and did not pretend to be dead anymore. What a joke. How will you report this to the Alliance? Don't think that I'm a 3-year-old baby who is so easy to trick. Murong, you destroyed the 100 Battles sect and weakened the Alliance. The Alliance's strength has been greatly damaged. I will definitely report this matter to the higher-ups. Just wait for the Alliance's punishment. Report it truthfully? Murong sneered in his heart. This guy would definitely twist the truth and add fuel to the fire in order to kill him and Shenzhen. However, when had Murong ever been afraid? One of his clones was the Vice Alliance leader of the Alliance. Who would dare to touch him? I am so scared. Murong laughed coldly as he looked at the Alliance messenger. That's right. It was unknown if the Alliance envoy really couldn't tell or if he was faking it. But if you swear allegiance to me, I'll give you a chance. Murong, since both you and your great Dao Realm experts are willing to become my slaves, I won't report this matter to the higher-ups. Furthermore, as my people, I can guarantee you your position and resources in the Alliance. He actually wanted to subdue Murong and the group of great Dao Realm experts. The appetite of the Alliance messenger was simply too huge. Moreover, was he so stupid that he couldn't see whose side he was on? Idiot! A Dao Lord standing beside Murong, you couldn't help but scoff. Although he was Murong-Yu's slave. Back then, he had no choice but to become Murong-Yu's slave. It was because Murong-Yu saved their lives and only enslaved them for 2 reincarnation cycles that they became Murong-Yu's slaves. Otherwise, they wouldn't have lowered themselves to become Murong-Yu's slaves. Now, this idiotic Alliance messenger actually wanted them to submit? That was simply a fantasy. The Alliance messenger wasn't angry. Instead, he calmly looked at Murong-Yu and the others. He was confident that he could make Murong-Yu his slave, unless Murong-Yu and the others wanted to die. But everything seemed to be going in the opposite direction of his thoughts. Ha! Murong-Yu ruthlessly slapped the Alliance emissary across the air. The Alliance messenger, who was already seriously injured, was caught off guard and half of his face was smashed. He was also sent flying by Murong-Yu's slap. The Alliance messenger was stunned. Based on what he imagined, shouldn't Murong-Yu be pledging loyalty to him now? Why did he hit him? Did he eat a leopard's guts? Then, the Alliance messenger was furious. Murong-Yu, are you courting death? How dare you hit me? Do you believe that I won't let all of you die? Even at such a time, he was still so arrogant. Murong-Yu didn't say anything and slapped him again. Once again, this idiotic Alliance messenger fell to the ground. In the end, Murong-Yu even stomped the Alliance messenger deep into the ground, making him eat a stomach full of dirt. I think you probably haven't seen the situation clearly, right? A mere Alliance messenger actually dares to be so arrogant. Do you believe that I can remove your identity as a messenger with just one sentence? Murong-Yu laughed coldly. The Alliance messenger was stunned once more. Murong-Yu wasn't afraid of him at all. Did he really have someone above him? If not, how would he dare to be so arrogant? Right, he definitely has someone above him. The more he thought about it, the more certain he was. Then he said in a trembling voice, Murong-Yu, everything is a misunderstanding. Everything is a misunderstanding. Like Murong, you didn't want to continue making things difficult for the Alliance messenger. He kicked him away. I think it really is a misunderstanding. But because of this misunderstanding, how many disciples did I, Shenzhen, lose? The losses are unbearable. So, Sir Messenger, what do you have to say? The Alliance messenger heaved a sigh of relief. Since Murong said that, he probably didn't dare to offend him too much, or he didn't want to dig deeper. The Alliance messenger was a smart person, so he said, I will compensate in 1 Dao artifact. 1 Dao artifact? The people around Murong were stunned. No one thought that the Alliance messenger actually had a Dao artifact, and he seemed to be very generous. In fact, what they didn't know was that the Alliance messenger's heart was aching. He also only had 1 Dao artifact. However, in order to curry favor with Murong, he couldn't help but go all out. Otherwise, if he really lost the identity of the Alliance messenger, it would be a tragedy. Maintaining the identity of the Alliance messenger, there would be a lot of benefits in the future, and he could even get the Dao artifact back. Just one Dao artifact? Shangzhen, lost nearly 100,000 people. This loss is really unbearable. Morongyu repeated faintly. Damn, although 100,000 people died, the resources obtained from destroying the Hunter Battle sect should be enough to compensate for the loss of millions or even tens of millions of people, right? Not to mention that less than 100,000 people died. The Alliance messenger cursed Murongyu in his heart. One Dao artifact is of course not enough. I will add another 10,000 selfless state origin artifacts and magic treasures, as well as 1 trillion origin crystals. Although he was cursing Murongyu in his heart, on the surface, the Alliance messenger looked at Murongyu with a face full of smiles. This guy really has a lot of resources. It seems that the Alliance messenger really has a lot of benefits. The few great Dao realm experts around Murong, you couldn't help but look a little upset. This was because they were also great Dao realm experts, but the resources in their hands were far from the Alliance messengers. Moreover, this wasn't all of the Alliance messenger's assets. This compensation was already quite sincere. However, Morongyu's face turned gloomy as if it wasn't enough. The Alliance messenger's face didn't look too good either. This already made him bleed a lot. Okay? Morongyu still wasn't satisfied? Morongyu, this is already my greatest sincerity. What do you want? Hand over your space treasure and all the treasures that you recognize as its master. Also, kowtow 3 times to our disciples who died. Then you can leave. Otherwise, I don't mind killing you, Murongyu said murderously. Murongyu, don't go too far. The Alliance messenger flew into a rage. It was impossible for him to hand over all his treasures. Kowtow? That was even more impossible. I'm going too far? If it weren't for you, why would I, Shangzhen, lose so many disciples? You have to do it today, even if you can't, Morongyu said coldly. At the same time, he gave a look to the great Dao realm experts beside him. Instantly, those great Dao realm experts took a step forward and looked at the Alliance messenger fiercely. The Alliance messenger instantly panicked. Wait, I'll give it to you. As he spoke, he threw out a space treasure. However, after throwing out the space treasure, he hesitated for a moment. However, when he came into contact with the murderous gazes of the Shangzhen great Dao realm experts, he took out 2 treasures without hesitation. One of them was just a selfless origin artifact. It should also be a top-grade one. However, the other one emitted an aura of the great Dao realm. Good lord, another Dao artifact. In other words, this guy had a total of 2 Dao artifacts. Could it be that the Alliance messenger's identity was really so lucrative? Or was it because this guy's background was too great? The Alliance messenger threw all the treasures at Murongyu's feet with an ugly expression. His face was abnormally pale. Even though he was a Dao Lord expert, forcefully removing the Dao artifact's ownership had still caused him great damage. Go out. Murongyu kept all the treasures into the Hichu Luo Shu. He glanced at the Alliance messenger and then strode toward the square. The Alliance messenger followed with an ugly expression. He's the Alliance messenger. It's also because of him that our Shangzhen lost tens of thousands of brothers. Now, take out the tokens of those disciples who died. Our Alliance messenger has to kowtow and apologize. Morongyu's low voice rang out in the square. This caused the originally noisy square to instantly quieten down. Swoosh! Close to 1 billion gazes instantly shot toward the Alliance messenger. Their gazes were filled with piercing, killing intent. The Alliance messenger's scalp couldn't help but turn numb. At the same time, identity tokens kept appearing in front of the Alliance messenger. These were the identity tokens of the fallen soldiers. They were collected by Murongyu after the war. After all, although people died, they died. After all, they died in battle. After the war, even if they weren't given the title of martyrs, they should at least have a grave. And if they didn't have the identity tokens, these fallen people would be forgotten very quickly. Chapter 22:12. Bang, bang, bang. The Alliance emissary kowtowed 3 times in front of these identity tokens with a humiliated expression. He was one of the emissaries of the Sacred Universe Alliance. He was powerful and had a high status. Yet, he was forced to kowtow to a group of true self-realm cultivators. It was a great humiliation. However, he was in a disadvantageous position now. Although he was extremely aggrieved, he endured everything. As long as he was still alive, he would get back everything that happened today 10 times, 100 times sooner or later. In fact, Murong-Yu didn't intend to kill him. If the Alliance emissary refused to kowtow, Murong-Yu couldn't do anything to him, right? However, he didn't know if the Alliance emissary was flexible or afraid of death. He actually kowtowed just like that. Murong-Yu, can I leave now? After kowtowing, the Alliance emissary stood up and looked at Murong-Yu indifferently. In the depths of his eyes, there was clearly a cold, killing intent flashing. You can leave. Murong-Yu waved his hand, indicating that the Alliance emissary could leave. We'll meet again. The Alliance emissary sneered and immediately moved, quickly disappearing in front of everyone. A coward who's afraid of death. Zhang Ao couldn't help but sneer. However, the anger in their hearts finally began to dissipate. Although they didn't kill the Alliance emissary, they made such a high status and powerful expert kowtow to the dead. This was even more painful than killing the other party. Okay, where's the 100 Battles Sex Treasure Vault? Let's go empty it. Murong-Yu smiled and looked at Murong-Xian and the others. At this time, Murong-Xian and the others had already found the location of the 100 Battles Sex Treasure Vault. Thus, the group of people went over in a mighty manner. However, as the 100 Battles Sex Treasure Vault, although the guards had been killed. However, the entire treasury was still shrouded in layers of restrictions and formations. It directly blocked the footsteps of Murong-Xian and the others. What do we do? Are we going to blast them away directly? Murong-Yi and the others looked at each other. If they were to forcefully break the array formation, who knew how long it would take? If it was directly blasted away, it would be even worse. Who knew if the treasure vault would be blown up as well? Let me do it, Murong-Yu indifferently said as he took a step forward. With a sway of his body, he had already entered the layers of formations and restrictions. Seeing this scene, Shangzhen and the others were stunned. They all looked at Murong-Yu with fear and trepidation. After all, there were hundreds of millions of formations and restrictions in here. If Murong-Yu were to barge in like this, once he triggered those formations, no matter how strong he was, he would not be able to withstand it. He would be instantly ground to dust. However, what shocked everyone was that Murong-Yu didn't do anything. He just walked slowly in the magic formations and restrictive spells as if he was taking a stroll in his garden. Wherever he passed, the restrictive spells and formations were not triggered. Furthermore, the crowd noticed that the space around Murong-Yu didn't even fluctuate in the slightest. Under everyone's shocked gaze, Murong-Yu had already arrived at the entrance of the treasure vault. Creak! Murong-Yu only gave a gentle push, and the door of the treasure vault was pushed open. It seemed that the treasure vaults of many forces were like this. The outside was shrouded in layers of formations and restrictive spells. However, the door of the treasure vault was not guarded at all. After all, if someone broke through the layers of formations and restrictive spells outside, they could easily enter the treasure vault. Increasing the difficulty here was only delaying the time for the other party to enter the treasure vault. Hichu Luo Shu. After entering the treasure vault, Murong-Yu took out the Hichu Luo Shu. Suddenly, wherever he passed, everything was swallowed into the Hichu Luo Shu. So much so that Murong-Yu did not even have time to see what good things were in this treasure vault. Before long, Murong-Yu completely emptied the 100 Battles Sex Treasure Vault. Boom! After Murong-Yu left the treasure vault, some of Shangzhen's disciples still did not leave. Instead, they looked at the hundreds of millions of formations and restrictive spells in a daze. Finally, a Shangzhen's disciple threw a nearby mountain rock and threw it in. The mountain rock had just entered the formation when it triggered the killing formation inside the formation and restrictive spells. Under the chain reaction, all the formations and restrictive spells were triggered. In an instant, the entire treasure vault was drowned in all kinds of light. Waves of terrifying aura that made people's souls tremble even rippled out and swept out in all directions. Everyone was startled, and they all looked at the array that had already exploded with shock. Swish! At this time, it was unknown who threw out a selfless realm-level origin artifact. Thus, an unforgettable scene appeared. The moment this relatively high-level origin artifact entered the large formation, it was directly crushed by the formation's power. This was a selfless realm-level origin artifact. Even an initial Dao realm expert could not easily destroy it. Thus, the surrounding people could not help but retreat, far away from the treasure vault that was wreaking havoc with the formation. In addition to being shocked, they admired Murongyu even more. What method did Murongyu use to roam through the countless formations and restrictive spells? Of course, it was impossible for them to know the answer. Murongyu would not tell them either. Sun Yu, I'll give this Dao artifact to you. In a hall of the 100 Battles sect that had not been destroyed yet, Murongyu, 30 Dao realm experts, Murong Xian, and even the upper echelons of the 1 billion army gathered here. Murongyu even took out one of the 2 Dao artifacts he obtained from the Alliance envoy and handed it to the Dao Lord expert beside him. This Dao Lord expert was the strongest Dao Lord by Murongyu's side. He had already reached the terrifying 5th stage Dao Lord realm. He was extremely strong. If not for him this time, Murongyu would not have been able to destroy the 100 Battles sect so easily. It could be said that Sun Yu's contribution in this battle was the highest. Murongyu was not a stingy person and would not mistreat his own people. Therefore, he directly gave the highest level, most powerful, and most precious Dao artifact to Sun Yu. Hearing this, Sun Yu's body trembled slightly. Then, his face revealed excitement, hesitation, and other complicated expressions. A Dao artifact, and a Dao Lord level 1 at that. To Sun Yu and all the other great Dao realm experts present, this was a fatal attraction. After all, the reason why they were trapped in the Soul Tribe and became Murongyu's slaves could be said to be because of the Dao artifact. Back then, more than 100 of them fought to the death for an ordinary initial Dao-level Dao artifact. Now, they did not expect that Murongyu would give a Dao Lord level Dao artifact to Sun Yu without even blinking an eye. Did Murongyu not know how precious a Dao artifact was? No, it was impossible for Murongyu not to know how precious a Dao artifact was, especially a Dao Lord level Dao artifact. But he was still so generous to give it to Sun Yu. Holy Lord, this gift is too precious. I can't afford it, so I can't accept it. Although Sun Yu wanted this Dao artifact very much, he refused. Murongyu looked at Sun Yu with a smile on his face, then looked at everyone present. I, Murongyu, have never been a stingy person. I'm very generous to my own people. Moreover, I've already told you that as long as you're willing to follow me, I won't mistreat you. Dao artifacts are just the beginning. Right now, there are only 2 Dao artifacts, so I can only give you 2 priority. But I believe that there will be more Dao artifacts in the future. Each of you will have a Dao artifact. I can even guarantee that if you follow me, you won't just be at the initial Dao or Dao Lord level. I believe that I have the ability. Murongyu began to rope in people. After all, great Dao realm existences were already peak experts in the universe. Even initial Dao experts were very rare and precious. Therefore, Murongyu wanted these 60 great Dao realm experts to stay in Shenzhen forever. He would not force them. He wanted these people to stay willingly. And this was only the first step of roping them in. The people present were not fools. They more or less sensed Murongyu's intentions, but they still felt excited. How many people in the world could be so generous as to give away a Dao Lord level Dao artifact? Moreover, there are only 2 Dao artifacts. Why would he give them all away? With such a generous and protective master, their lives were worth it. Therefore, everyone was excited. However, Sun Yu still did not accept it. Sun Yu, as the saying goes, a treasure sword is given to a hero. You're the only one present who can unleash the power of this Tao artifact. If you obtain it, you will be able to unleash even more strength in the future. At that time, we will suffer fewer losses and obtain more resources. In the end, Sun Yu accepted Murong Yu's good intentions. He accepted this Tao, Lord-level Tao artifact. As for the other initial Tao-level Tao artifact, Murong Yu gave it to another Tao Lord expert, Qi Kai. Although Qi Kai's strength was slightly inferior to Sun Yu's, he was still a terrifying fourth-order Tao Lord. During the days of battle, before Murong Yu's strength broke through, he could only rely on these two people for the time being. In this way, the strength of Murong Yu's group became even stronger. Furthermore, in the following days, they would be even more loyal to Murong Yu and work for him. After resting for a few days in the ruins of the 100 Battles sect, the 1 billion army set off again. Their target was the Infinite Palace. Perhaps the news of the destruction of the 100 Battles sect had already spread, or perhaps the Alliance envoy was really afraid of Murong Yu and did not dare to play any tricks behind his back. Therefore, the 1 billion army did not encounter any obstacles wherever they passed. In fact, they did not even need to pay the crystals needed to teleport to the teleportation array they used. The Alliance envoy must have specially taken care of it. In the end, the group finally stepped into the Infinite Palace Star Domain. Chapter 22:13. The Infinite Palace was a power that possessed a Tao Lord. Moreover, it was said that the Infinite Palace had more than one Tao Lord. The Infinite Palace was indeed a colossus in the vicinity of the Infinite Palace. No matter if it was Shenzhen, the Occult Palace, or even the 100 Battles sect, they were far inferior to the Infinite Palace. But even then, the Infinite Palace couldn't be considered to be a formidable power in the Sacred Universe Alliance. Even though the Infinite Palace had a few Tao Lords, none of them could hold the position of an officer in the Sacred Universe Alliance, let alone hold an even higher position. At most, the Infinite Palace was only equivalent to a squad leader. On the other hand, powers like Shenzhen and the 100 Battles sect were members of this squad. It couldn't be helped. Even though the Sacred Universe was inferior to the Martial Universe and Divine Universe, but it was still a universe. There were too many formidable powers. Even though there weren't many Tao Lords, there were still quite a few in the entire universe. Most importantly, there were truly too few positions in the Sacred Universe Alliance. A few dozen Tao Lords didn't even have the qualifications to hold the position of an officer. At this moment, cultivators were everywhere in the Infinite Palace. It was even to the extent that after he entered the Infinite Palace, Murong Yu even frequently saw groups flashing past him. All of them were like Shenzhen, and they'd responded to his summons. Supposedly, the squad leader of the Infinite Palace had over 100,000 members under him. In other words, there were over 100,000 powers that directly obeyed the orders of the Infinite Palace. If every power had an average of 2 Grand Tao Realm experts, then there would be over 200,000 Grand Tao Realm experts that obeyed the orders of the Infinite Palace. This was an extremely terrifying force. After all, the Sacred Universe was truly too huge. However, the probability of producing a Grand Tao Realm expert was around 1 in 10 trillion. In other words, only one Grand Tao Realm expert would emerge from every 10 trillion people. This obviously showed how many cultivators there were below the Grand Tao Realm. When the two were compared, there were really too few Grand Tao Realm experts. All of you can set up camp on this planet for now. Murong Yu led the army of 1 billion into the Infinite Palace. Just as he was about to go somewhere, a disciple of the Infinite Palace appeared within Murong Yu's field of vision. Motherf Kerr, isn't he just a disciple of the Myriad Palace? Their eyes were growing on top of their heads. What a snob. In the crowd, Li Ling could not help but voice out in displeasure. Ever since these disciples of the Myriad Palace appeared, they had not opened their eyes to look at Murong Yu and the others. Murong Yu even felt that the reason why these people had arranged for them to be stationed here was entirely because of orders from above. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come so close, right? They're only at the true self realm. I really don't know what they have to be so arrogant about. Murong Xian sneered. Everyone nodded. What infuriated them the most was that they were currently on an ordinary planet. The heaven and earth yuan qi here was not suitable for them to cultivate. Even so, the qi of heaven and earth was still very scarce. There was almost none. He had been neglected. Murong Yu, immediately go to the Wanliang Palace for a meeting. After he led them to this desolate planet, that disciple of the Myriad Palace finally glanced at Murong Yu. And at the same time that he spoke with disdain, he tossed something to Murong Yu. Murong Yu received it, and he knew with a single glance that it was an identity token. The token was around the size of a palm, and one side was inscribed with the words Saint, while the other side was inscribed with the words Myriad Palace. I presume this is the identity token of the Myriad Palace in the Alliance, right? You actually dared to directly address the hallowed Lord by his name. Zhang Ao and the others were on the verge of exploding with rage. If Murong Yu hadn't stopped him, he would have killed that disciple on the spot. Don't be rash. This is the Myriad Palace, and there are many Downlord Realm experts here. We aren't a match for them. Murong Yu frowned slightly and glared at Zhang Ao and the others. Zhang Ao and the others instantly fell silent. However, the killing intent in their hearts didn't decrease at all. Since he didn't know where the Myriad Palace was, Murong Yu couldn't be bothered to ask that disciple. Presumably, that disciple would probably not answer him, even if he did, right? So, after he made arrangements for Shengzhen's army, Murong Yu brought Sun Yu along and headed towards the Myriad Palace. Even though he didn't know where the Myriad Palace was, Murong Yu quickly found out about it. Shengzhen's army was stationed at the most remote part of the Myriad Palace, and it was extremely far away from the Myriad Palace. Moreover, Murong Yu found out that such arrangements weren't made by those disciples of the Myriad Palace. It was the Myriad Palace that had made the arrangements. The stronger a power was, the better its location was, and the closer it was to the Myriad Palace. On the other hand, Shengzhen's current location was probably the furthest away from the Myriad Palace. Even the Heavenly Mystery Palace's encampment was closer to the Myriad Palace than Shengzhen's. What made Murong Yu the most speechless was that to borrow the teleportation array in the Myriad Palace, not only did he have to pay the essence crystals needed to activate the teleportation array, but he also had to pay an extremely expensive teleportation fee. This was taking the opportunity to rip him off. However, even though Murong Yu was extremely displeased, he still paid these expensive fees and only appeared on the Myriad Palace after more than half a day. Not everyone could enter the Myriad Palace. Only those with an identity token were qualified to enter, just like the token in Murong Yu's hand. After many inquiries, Murong Yu finally appeared in an incomparably huge hall. At this time, there were already 200,000 to 300,000 cultivators in the hall. They were all Great Dao Realm powerhouses. Only Murong Yu was only at the Heaven Realm. Therefore, when Murong Yu stepped into the hall, almost all the gazes in the hall were directed at him. Surprise, disdain, indifference. All kinds of gazes were focused on Murong Yu. However, Murong Yu had already seen this kind of scene before. Therefore, his expression did not change at all. After sweeping his gaze, Murong Yu finally sat down on an empty seat closest to the entrance of the hall. This was the only empty seat in the entire hall. It must have been left for him. Seeing that Murong Yu's seat was the last, he was looked down upon by the Myriad Palace. Sun Yu's face immediately darkened. However, he did not say anything in the end. Instead, he stood behind Murong Yu like he was Murong Yu's guard. Little friend, you seem to have come to the wrong place, right? Why aren't you hurrying to cultivate? Not everyone is qualified to enter this place. At this moment, a wretched-looking old man with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks who was closest to Murong Yu said in a shrill voice. In other words, Murong Yu is not qualified to step into this hall at all. He is the sect master of our chaos, Shengzhen. Sun Yu really could not stand it anymore. After coldly glancing at the old man with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks, he said coldly, "A Heaven Realm powerhouse." The old man with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks couldn't help but be stunned. The others' reactions were similar. How can such a lowly powerhouse be qualified to enter here? The old man with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks looked at Muronyu with a face full of confusion and disdain. Originally, Muronyu could not be bothered to argue with this fool. However, this guy was getting more and more overboard. The two of them were seated next to each other, and it did not seem like his faction was very powerful. Therefore, he glanced at the old man with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks and discovered that this old man was only at the beginner 8th stage. In terms of combat power, he was not as good as him. Beginner 8th stage strength, it seems that your faction is not that strong. Muronyu said lightly, his face full of ridicule. The old man with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks immediately became angry. In any case, I'm also a beginner Dao powerhouse. However, it doesn't seem like something like the Chaos Shangzhen that can't even be seen on the stage. Muronyu sneered and waved the token in his hand. I'm really sorry, but this was personally invited by the Alliance emissary. What you're saying is that among the many powerhouses in our infinite palace, our Lord Emissary's vision is bad or blind. The old man with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks face instantly turned red. For a moment, he was speechless. Continue to say that the Shangzhen was not up to standard, right? That meant that the Alliance emissary was blind. He was speechless after being refuted like this, right? However, he was a little unwilling to be questioned by Muronyu, this brat, until he had nothing to say. Seeing this, Muronyu said in a low voice, "Idiot. Who are you calling idiot?" The old man with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks looked at Muronyu in anger. I'm calling the one who didn't make the confession. Muronyu is not afraid of this old fool at all. You're courting death. The old man with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks was instantly enraged. He threw a punch at Muronyu. His aura exploded. He had actually used all his strength to attack. He actually wanted to kill Muronyu in one hit. A cold, killing intent flashed past Muronyu's eyes. After stopping Sunyu from attacking, he also threw a punch. Boom! After a huge, muffled sound, a gust of wind swept out in all directions with the two of them as the center. At the same time, a black shadow flew out with the gust of wind like a broken rag doll. It was the old man with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks. Meanwhile, Muronyu stood still on the spot. Instantly, the expressions of the 2 to 300,000 powerhouses in the hall changed. Each and every one of them looked at Muronyu in shock. They were absolutely sure that Muronyu did not suppress his cultivation level. He was indeed in the Heaven Realm. However, a Heaven Realm cultivator could defeat a level 8 beginner Dao powerhouse with one punch? Wasn't this battle prowess too heaven-defying? Little bastard, you plotted against me? The old man with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks spat out a mouthful of blood and looked at Muronyu with a ferocious expression. He did not think that Muronyu really had the strength to do so. Instead, it was Muronyu's guards who secretly made a move. Muronyu's face was full of disdain. He did not even bother to speak. Little bastard, do you dare to have a fair fight with me? The old man with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks roared. Uffed. Muronyu spat out the tea he had just drunk. Then, he looked at the old man as if he was looking at an idiot. Idiot, you a level 8 beginner Dao cultivator actually dare to challenge me. You want a mere Heaven Realm cultivator to have a fair fight with you? Ha! The surrounding people all laughed out loud. They looked at the old man with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks with ridicule. Chapter 22:14. The monkey-cheeked old man's face alternated between green and white. His eyes flickered with terrifying killing intent as he looked at Muronyu. He really wanted to kill Muronyu, but he also knew that being injured by Muronyu's punch today had already made him lose face, especially when he proposed to have a fair fight with Muronyu. However, since he had already done it, it already attracted the ridicule of the surrounding people. Since that's the case, let's continue and kill Muronyu. As long as he killed Muronyu, who cared what others thought? Hence, he sneered, Little bastard, you don't dare? How shameless! Why don't I challenge you? Before Muronyu could speak, a voice with deep mockery sounded in the hall. This voice was a little familiar. Murong-yu looked over and happened to see the palace lord of the heavenly mystery palace winking at him. Murong-yu could not help but be speechless. In terms of true strength, Shenzhen was much stronger than the heavenly mystery palace now. However, heavenly mystery's seat was much closer to Murong-yu's. The myriad light palace truly looked down on Shenzhen too much. However, a glint flashed across Murong-yu's eyes. At this moment, heavenly mystery had already broken through to the Tao Lord realm. After stagnating at the initial Tao realm for so many years, heavenly mystery finally succeeded in breaking through. Furthermore, when he was at the initial Tao realm, heavenly mystery already had the strength to kill Tao Lords. Now that he had broken through, his combat strength would be even stronger. He was not invincible in the Tao Lord realm, but he still had the combat strength to kill enemies 2 or 3 or even 4 or 5 minor realms above him. Who are you? This is between me and him. You'd better not interfere. The monkey-cheeked old man growled without even looking. However, when he saw heavenly mystery and saw that heavenly mystery was a Tao Lord expert, he was stunned and his expression changed drastically. A Tao Lord expert was an existence that could easily crush him. Is that so? This matter really did have something to do with me. Other than being the holy lord of the primal chaos Shenzhen, Murong-yu is also the vice palace lord of my heavenly mystery palace. You bullying the vice palace master of my heavenly mystery palace. Does it have anything to do with me? As he spoke, Tianji had already stepped in front of the monkey-faced old man. At the same time, the aura of a Tao Lord swept out like a torrent towards the monkey-faced old man. Thud, thud, thud. The old man's expression changed abruptly, and he retreated with a look of horror. However, Tianji did not intend to kill the old man. At the very least, the timing was not right. Therefore, his aura disappeared in a flash. Just as he was about to continue speaking, Murong-yu spoke up. Didn't this idiot want to have a fair fight with me? All right, I've decided to have a fair fight with him. Whoosh! As soon as Murong-yu's voice came out, the surrounding people were shocked. A celestial realm cultivator wanted to have a fair fight with a level 8 initial Tao realm cultivator. Did he really have the strength to do so, or was it just for show? At this point, everyone present was somewhat doubtful. Just now, was it Murong-yu who sent that old man retreating with a punch, or was it Sun Yu who made a move? Murong-yu, are you crazy? Tianji was somewhat anxious. Although Murong-yu was more heaven-defying, the difference in cultivation realm between the two was too great. This was crossing a full 3 major realms. It was true that Murong-yu was heaven-defying, but was he this heaven-defying? Murong-yu did not go crazy. He had the ability to easily defeat the monkey-faced old man. Furthermore, didn't the Myriad Palace not value him and even look down on him? It didn't matter. Whatever face and such were earned by him. He needed to amaze the world with a single feat here. Otherwise, he would only be reduced to an existence like cannon fodder. If he did not change, Shenzhen would not be able to raise his head at all here. Perhaps, when the great battle began, he would be sent out as cannon fodder. Of course, with the Myriad Palace's status and strength. Perhaps all the forces present were cannon fodder. However, if he was valued by the Myriad Palace, even if he was cannon fodder, it would not be Shenzhen's turn. Therefore, he had to reveal part of his strength. In a battle between universes, it was not good to keep a low profile. All right, everyone heard that, right? It was this little bastard who took the initiative to request a fair battle with me. I didn't force him. If there are any injuries, it's his own fault. The old man laughed loudly, but his expression was very ferocious and murderous. If Murong-yu was really not his match, then it would not be injuries. It would be death. Murong-yu. Tianji looked at Murong-yu with a stern expression. Murong-yu shook his head. I'm fine. I can beat 10 of this kind of trash alone. Perhaps Murong-yu's confidence infected Tianji. So Tianji stopped persuading Murong-yu. Therefore, Murong-yu and the old man both jumped out of the hall and appeared in the open space in front of the hall. At the same time, many people in the hall followed them out. Even though some people did not come out, they extended their spiritual senses. Old man, seeing that you're a bag of old bones, I'll let you attack first. Standing face to face with the old man with a pointy mouth and ape-like chin, Murong-Yu said indifferently. The old man with a pointy mouth and ape-like chin was instantly enraged. He laughed sinisterly and threw a punch. Then I don't mind. Kid, take my punch. It was powerful. The aura that erupted was already the old man's peak limit. After being defeated by Murong-Yu with one punch, he was afraid that others would interfere. Therefore, this time, he attacked with all his strength, wanting to kill Murong-Yu with one blow. Sun Yu stood not far from the two of them. He cupped his fists and looked coldly at the old man with a pointy mouth and ape-like chin. On the other hand, Tianji stood on the other side, looking nervously at Murong-Yu. Once he realized that something was wrong, he would attack immediately. As for the others, they were just there to watch the show. Whether Murong-Yu or the old man lived or died had nothing to do with them. In a flash, the old man's fist was already in front of Murong-Yu. It looked like it was going to hit Murong-Yu. Murong-Yu, on the other hand, was still as calm as ever. Was he too late to react? Or was he confident? The surrounding people watched with smiles on their faces. The battle between the two of them was at most a joke. Whoosh! Just as the old man's fist was about to land on Murong-Yu, Murong-Yu made his move. In a flash, Murong-Yu's right palm had already caught the old man's fist. Bang! After a muffled sound, the old man's fist stopped on the spot, unable to move forward an inch. The earth-shattering aura also stopped in an instant. The old man looked at Murong-Yu in shock, fear flashing in the depths of his eyes. Others did not know what was going on, but as the person involved, he knew very well. After Murong-Yu caught his fist, Murong-Yu's large hand was like an iron clamp that held his fist firmly. Even though he struggled with all his might, it was like an ant trying to shake a tree. He did not know his own strength and could not even move an inch. He could clearly feel that this was Murong-Yu's own strength and not someone secretly helping him. Therefore, he was terrified. At this moment, Murong-Yu smiled brightly. Old man, you threw a punch at me. Now it's my turn. Try to take a punch from me. As he spoke, his left and right had already attacked like lightning, and a punch landed on the old man's chest. The old man wanted to struggle and dodge, but because Murong-Yu had grabbed his fist, he could not dodge at all. Therefore, he could only take Murong-Yu's punch directly. Everyone only heard a muffled sound and did not see anything after that. Although the old man took Murong-Yu's punch, it seemed that nothing had happened. The old man's expression did not change. Just when everyone was about to laugh at Murong-Yu, Murong-Yu had already retracted his hands. Done. Murong-Yu looked relaxed. He clapped his hands and walked toward the main hall. The old man with a pointy mouth and monkey-like chin stood motionless, and even his expression did not change. What was going on? Everyone was a little confused. Whoosh! At this moment, a breeze blew past. With a poof, the old man with a pointy mouth and monkey-like chin, who was originally standing there, suddenly shattered into millions of pieces like a pile of sand and finally scattered with the wind. He killed the old man with one punch. A first-stage Heaven Realm cultivator killed a first-stage Heaven Realm cultivator? This brat was truly ruthless and merciless. For a moment, everyone who saw this scene felt a chill run down their backs. Was it not just because of Murong-Yu's heaven-defying strength, but also because of his ruthlessness? Or perhaps both. However, Murong-Yu clearly felt that everyone was looking at him differently. There was no more disdain or ridicule. There was only fear. Especially those initial stage Heaven Realm cultivators, their eyes were filled with fear. If Murong-Yu could kill a first stage Heaven Realm old man with one punch, he could also kill them. Therefore, many people made up their minds to never provoke Murong-Yu in the future. Clap, clap, clap. At this moment, a round of applause came from outside. Murong-Yu and everyone turned to look behind them and happened to see a group of experts slowly walking over. Dao Master Experts. Murong-Yu did well. Your combat strength is heaven-defying, and you're swift and decisive. The middle-aged man in the lead looked at Murongyu with a praising gaze and was not stingy with his praise. Palace Master. Some of the surrounding cultivators who recognized the identity of the person who came immediately bowed to him. Murongyu also reacted. The person who came should be the Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace who had not shown himself. Therefore, he also cupped his fists slightly. The Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace nodded slightly, smiled at Murongyu, and then took the lead to enter the main hall. Everyone immediately entered the main hall and sat down. However, when the Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace saw that Murongyu was actually sitting at the last seat, he could not help but frown slightly. Murongyu, come and sit here. Murongyu was shocked. Everyone in the main hall was shocked. This was because the seat that the Wanliang Palace asked Murongyu to sit at was the seat closest to the front. Murongyu knew that after this incident, his seat would definitely move forward, but he did not expect to move to the front. Chapter 22:15. Moving to the front, the position closest to the Palace Master. What did this mean? It meant that Murongyu's performance had gained the recognition of the Palace Master, and the Palace Master was even prepared to focus on nurturing Murongyu. After all, in the entire Sacred Universe Alliance, a colossus like the Myriad Palace was only equivalent to a small team leader, and the Palace Master was powerful. So why would he lower himself to the position of a small team leader? He would definitely pursue the position of a deacon, elder, or even deputy alliance leader. That way, he would be able to rule the world. Naturally, he would be able to obtain more resources. The more resources he had, the more beneficial it would be to the improvement of his own strength. With the support of vast amounts of resources, he might even be able to break through to the legendary Tao Ancestor Realm. And who in the Sacred Universe didn't want to reach the Tao Ancestor Realm? At that time, he would definitely become an overlord in the Sacred Universe, and even the Martial Tao Universe. However, how would the Palace Master of the Myriad Palace improve his position in the Alliance? Other than relying on himself, he would have to rely on everyone in the main hall. As long as they made contributions in the Universe War, he would naturally be promoted. Moreover, he knew that once a war broke out between 2 or even 3 universes, the war would definitely last for an extremely long time. During this period of time, even a small cultivator could grow into a powerhouse. Especially Murongyu, who had such heaven-defying and abnormal aptitude. How abnormal was his talent to have the combat strength of the initial Tao realm at the Heaven realm? What if he advanced to the True Self realm or Selfless realm? The Selfless realm would probably have the strength of a Tao Master, right? In the eyes of the Palace Master of the Myriad Palace and the others, the Heaven realm was basically no different from the True Self realm or Selfless realm. If they poured a large amount of resources, they could easily advance a Heaven realm cultivator to the True Self realm or Selfless realm. If Murongyu pledged loyalty to him, he had the confidence to advance Murongyu to the Selfless realm or even the initial Tao realm. With Murongyu's heaven-defying aptitude, if he advanced to the initial Tao realm, wouldn't he have the terrifying combat strength of a Tao Ancestor realm? Even if he doesn't possess a strength of the Tao Lord realm, his strength is sufficient to move unhindered through Tao Lords, right? Therefore, the Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace immediately expressed his attitude. Murongyu was overwhelmed by this unexpected favor. It was easy for him to sit in that position now, but he would definitely be envied by many people behind his back. As expected, as soon as the Wanliang Palace's Palace Master finished speaking, almost everyone in the hall focused their gazes on him, other than the Palace Master of the mysterious Heavenly Palace, who had a sincere smile in his eyes. The eyes of the others were filled with jealousy. They all knew what it meant to be recognized by the Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace. They had probably already thought of how to curry favor with the Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace. However, they never expected that Murongyu would be recognized by the Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace with just this battle. He sensed the envious gazes of the others, and there was no lack of Tao Lords amongst them. Murongyu felt his scalp go numb. However, who was Murongyu? After the initial shock, he quickly regained his composure. Wasn't this exactly what he hoped for? So, he led Sun Yu forward with large strides. "Thank you, Palace Master." After he thanked the Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace, Murong Yu boldly sat down at the first seat. In an instant, the expressions of most of the experts in the hall had changed. It was even to the extent that Murong Yu noticed that some of their eyes flickered with terrifying killing intent. All of them were targeted at him. This kid actually dared to sit there? A Dowlord who sat by Murong Yu's side had a slightly gloomy expression as he pondered in his heart. Murong Yu's status was superior to his, and this was something that he couldn't tolerate. However, he could only curse in his heart. He absolutely didn't dare to question it. Actually, it wasn't just him. Most of the experts in the hall had similar thoughts. The Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace glanced at them, and then he said in a low voice, "Besides the 100 Battle Sect, everyone has arrived as scheduled. This makes me feel very gratified. I won't speak any further about the Alliance. All the powers in the Alliance belong to my Wanliang Palace, and they're under the command of my Wanliang Palace. I hope that all of you will cooperate with me during this period of time, and you'll carry out my orders without disobeying. Otherwise," when he spoke up to hear, the Palace Master's voice became icy cold. "Kill without mercy." All of them couldn't help but shudder when they sensed the coldness in the Palace Master's words. After that, they shouted loudly in unison, "We'll definitely obey your orders and follow the lead of the Wanliang Palace." Murong Yu went with the flow and displayed his loyalty at an appropriate time. Otherwise, he would definitely be killed. The Palace Master nodded with gratification when he saw their reactions. So, he spoke a great deal about the Alliance in the following period of time, and he even gave orders to numerous commanders. However, they were furious because the Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace gave orders to all the members of the Wanliang Palace. The 100,000 powers were divided into 10 groups, and every group had 10,000 powers. Moreover, every group had a group leader. There was no doubt that these 10 people were all disciples of the Wanliang Palace. In the end, the Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace asked with a smile, "Is there anything you're dissatisfied with?" Everyone was about to curse in their hearts. Not only did they not get any positions, but they also had to listen to the orders of those group leaders. How could they be satisfied? However, on the surface, everyone expressed that there was nothing they were dissatisfied with. Did they dare to say that they were dissatisfied? The Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace nodded in satisfaction. "I hope that everyone will work hard in the future. If our contributions are enough, my position in the Alliance will be higher, and I might even become a deacon or an elder. At that time, all of you will benefit a lot. For now, I can only ask everyone to make do with it." Everyone expressed their opinions one after another, which made Murong Yu feel rather disgusted. After half a day, the meeting finally ended and everyone left. Just as Murong Yu got up to leave, he was called back. "Murong Yu, you stay." Swoosh! Hearing the myriad palace's Palace Master's words, everyone's gaze once again focused on Murong Yu. What did it mean for Murong Yu to stay in his stomach? It must be special treatment, and there would be benefits. "Murong Yu, do you know why I asked you to stay alone?" After everyone left, only Murong Yu and the Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace were left in the hall. As for Sun Yu, he was already waiting outside the hall. Murong Yu shook his head. He really didn't know the reason. The Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace had a smile on his face. "Murong Yu, your aptitude is not bad, and you even have a battle strength that exceeds your own by 3 major realms. In time, you will be the most brilliant genius in the Holy Universe. However, with your current situation, it's not possible for you to quickly increase your realm, right?" This was the truth, so Murong Yu nodded and admitted it. "Do you want to break through to a higher realm? Do you want to become stronger?" Wasn't this all nonsense? Which cultivator didn't want to become stronger? It would be best if they all became chaos controllers. Therefore, he nodded fiercely again. The smile on the Palace Master's face became even more brilliant. "If I focus on nurturing you, I believe you can easily break through to the true self realm, or even the selfless realm soon." Murong Yu was instantly overjoyed, But how could there be such a good thing in the world? Therefore, he asked hesitantly, I believe you won't nurture me for no reason, Palace Master. So you must have some conditions, right? The Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace smiled and nodded. It's refreshing to talk to smart people. I don't have many conditions. I just need you to be loyal to me. That's all. How about it? You want to control my soul? Morong Yu frowned slightly. Of course not. I just need you to swear a soul poison oath, the Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace said with a smile. Is it really that simple? Morong Yu looked at the Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace with some suspicion. The Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace didn't say anything and only nodded. Therefore, Morong Yu's face revealed a look of ecstasy, and he hurriedly swore, Morong Yu, swear with the soul in my soul space that I will be loyal to the Wanliang Palace and the Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace for the rest of my life. If I violate the oath, my soul will be annihilated and consigned to eternal damnation. Ha! The Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace laughed out loud. Ordinary people might not know the horror of an oath, but experts who had comprehended the Tao deeply knew the horror of an oath. Once the oath was violated, one would be punished by the laws of heaven and earth. Therefore, although he didn't control Morong Yu's soul, he needed Morong Yu to swear. However, he didn't hear the trick in Morong Yu's words. With the soul in the soul space at this time, that soul was only Morong Yu's soul clone and not his main soul. Therefore, even if he violated the oath one day, at most, his soul clone would be consigned to eternal damnation and destroyed. It wouldn't harm his soul at all. If the soul clone was gone, at most, it would only waste some soul power. As long as Morong Yu was willing, he could instantly condense a new soul clone. Therefore, he expressed his loyalty without any pressure. With a wave of his hand, a long sword appeared in front of Morong Yu. It floated in the void, emitting the aura of the great Tao. This was a Tao artifact of the elementary level. Morong Yu, this is the Tao artifact I'm giving you. This is just a greeting gift. As long as you pledge your loyalty to me, you will receive benefits one after another, the Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace said with a smile. Morong Yu was shocked. He didn't expect this guy to be so generous. However, it would be a waste not to accept a free gift. Therefore, he put the long sword into the Hichu Luo Shu. Thank you for your kindness, Palace Master. I, Morong Yu, will be loyal to you forever. Morong Yu expressed his loyalty with a grateful expression. However, in his heart, he was about to vomit. This kind of fawning attitude was really too disgusting. If he didn't need to use the Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace, he would have left long ago. Next, after chatting with the Palace Master of the Wanliang Palace for a while, he left this place. Chapter 22:16. It could be said that Morong Yu and even the entire Shenzhen had become the personal guards of the Limitless Palace Master. Morong Yu's treatment was even better than the elders of the Limitless Palace, although he couldn't even get a small captain position. But it was only a matter of time. In addition to being gifted a Tao artifact, Morong Yu was also allowed to move Shenzhen's disciples to the vicinity of the Limitless Palace. One should know that the Limitless Palace was the place with the highest level and richest heaven and earth essence chi in the entire star field. Except for Shenzhen, the other 100,000 forces were not qualified to enter the primordial star where the Limitless Palace was located. Morong Yu suddenly stopped in his tracks. He didn't know why, but just a moment ago, his soul had suddenly trembled. Morong Yu's soul wouldn't tremble for no reason, and it was his main soul. Previously, when this happened, it meant that there was danger nearby, and it was even a danger targeted at him. Moreover, the level of danger was relatively high, and it had already endangered his life. Therefore, his soul trembled as a warning. What's wrong? Seeing Morong Yu suddenly stop with a solemn look, Sun Yu couldn't help but be stunned. We seem to have entered an ambush, Morong Yu said calmly. What? Sun Yu was shocked, and his soul erupted like a stormy sea, instantly sweeping in all directions. However, the surroundings were quiet, and there was no ambush at all. There wasn't even a single beast nearby. Are you sure? There isn't even a single beast nearby? Sun Yu looked at Murong Yu with some suspicion. Although he knew that Murong Yu wasn't a suspicious person, he couldn't see anything even though he couldn't. But even with his 5th Order Dao Monarch strength, he couldn't see anything. How could Murong Yu's vision be sharper than his? Think about it. How was this place when we came? There were beasts running rampant here. Now that there are no beasts, what does it mean? Murong Yu said indifferently, and the two of them had already used their fastest speed to retreat. In fact, when they realized that they had entered an ambush, they paused for a moment, and then they quickly retreated. After all, if they knew that they had entered an ambush and stayed in the same place, wouldn't they be courting death? Sun Yu's face changed slightly. In this aspect, he was far inferior to Murong Yu. Boom! At this moment, the sky changed color. The sky was originally clear and cloudless. In the blink of an eye, it was pitch black, and he couldn't even see his own fingers. Formation. Both Murong Yu and Sun Yu were shocked. Murong Yu was even more shocked. Murong Yu's chaotic celestial body physique allowed him to be unafraid of formations. He could travel through formations and restrictions at will without triggering them. At the same time, it made Murong use of the formation of Murong Yu. It was impossible for him to enter a formation of Murong Yu's without feeling anything. Normally, he would be able to sense the existence of formations and restrictions when he was still a distance away from them, no matter how hidden the formation and restriction were. But now, he couldn't feel anything. Rumble. The moment the sky turned dark, an extremely terrifying force with a terrifying aura tore through the sky from afar and whistled over. Sun Yu's face changed slightly. He sensed that the power of these attacks had surpassed his. In other words, the person who launched these attacks had a higher cultivation level and combat strength than him. They must be killed. Who was trying to kill them? Before he had time to think, Sun Yu roared, took out the Dao Lord level Dao artifact that Murong Yu had given him, and slashed out in the air. An incomparably huge sword light instantly spurted out, slashing the sky and directly shattering a bombardment of power that was bombarding towards him. However, more power tore through the air. Sun Yu's face was solemn, and the power in his body erupted like a torrent, condensing a power shield around him and Murong Yu to protect them firmly inside. At the same time, the Dao artifact in his hand erupted with terrifying power, and he slashed out again and again. During this process, they still flew in the direction they had retreated from, trying to leave this formation. After the sky changed color, Murong Yu's face was somewhat gloomy, and the depths of his eyes flickered with a contemplative light. Thousands of power bombarded him. In the beginning, Sun Yu could still barely break those attacks. But as more and more power came, he could no longer do anything. In the end, he focused on defense. Bringing Murong Yu with him, he constantly moved to dodge those attacks. Only when he couldn't dodge would he slash out with his sword. Puff! Sun Yu's sword slashed fiercely on a power that bombarded him. But not only was the power not shattered, but Sun Yu also spat out a mouthful of blood. He was injured. Puff! 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 After Sun Yu was injured, he lost his defense. Waves of power swept over him, and Sun Yu couldn't resist at all. If he fought back forcefully, he would only be injured continuously, and blood would continue to spurt out. Holy Lord, this won't do. We have to rush out of this formation. At the very least, we have to destroy this formation. Sun Yu's face was ashen as he growled. In the face of thousands of terrifying attacks, he felt that he was powerless to resist. He was in despair. While they were escaping, Murong Yu was also looking for the formation and even the location of the formation's eye. However, what made him feel rather helpless was that he couldn't find the formation or the formation's eye at all. There was no trace of it. There seemed to be a sense of déjà vu in this situation. However, at that moment, Murong Yu couldn't recall what exactly made him feel so familiar. Holy Lord, what's going on? Why do I feel that the formation seems to be locked onto us? No matter where we go, The formation will always follow us. If this continues, the two of us will definitely die today. Sun Yu's anxious voice rang in Murong Yu's ears. It's following us? Hearing Sun Yu's words, a light suddenly flashed through Murong Yu's mind. In an instant, he seemed to have thought of something. The formation's projection. It must be the formation's projection. Murong Yu's eyes shone brightly. He finally realized what it was. However, Sun Yu was stunned. He didn't know what the formation's projection was. Thus, Murong Yu briefly explained the formation's projection. In other words, unless we can destroy the formation's true body or escape from the formation's projection, we can only wait for death. Sun Yu was dumbfounded. This was the first time he had heard of such a formation. Murong Yu didn't want to admit it, but he still nodded slightly. We're finished. Sun Yu was helpless, and his face was filled with despair. Hold on, there's always a way out. Murong Yu patted Sun Yu's shoulder and said solemnly. Due to Sun Yu's protection, he wasn't injured. However, Sun Yu's situation was getting worse. He was already risking his life. Even so, Sun Yu couldn't hold on for long. He couldn't even hold on for 15 minutes. This was because Murong Yu had given him a Tao artifact. Otherwise, Sun Yu, who didn't have a Tao artifact, would have been killed long ago. If Sun Yu was killed, Murong Yu definitely wouldn't be able to escape death. The killing intent in Murong Yu's heart soared. He couldn't figure out who had set up the formation's projection to target him. This was the rhythm of killing him. Could it be the Alliance's messenger? It shouldn't be the Alliance's messenger. He had more missions and wasn't in the Infinite Palace. Then who was it? Could it be those envious and jealous masters of the forces? It was possible, but he didn't know who it was. Sun Yu spat out a large mouthful of blood, and his face became even paler. The aura that erupted from his body became even weaker. Even his hand that was holding the Tao artifact was trembling violently. It was obvious that he couldn't hold on for long. Holy Lord, I can't hold on much longer. Sun Yu gritted his teeth and said, Don't be discouraged. The formation's projection also has a distance and range limit. As long as we put enough distance between us, the formation's projection can't do anything to us. As he spoke, the life force in Murong Yu's body surged into Sun Yu's body like raging waves, quickly healing Sun Yu's injured physical body. However, although the life force could heal Sun Yu's injuries, it couldn't allow him to hold on for long. After all, the formation's attack was too fierce. However, this also extended the time that Sun Yu could hold on, giving them a chance to break out of the formation's encirclement. However, perhaps it was because they couldn't kill Murong Yu and Sun Yu after such a long time. The person controlling the formation was already anxious. An increasingly violent force blasted over, tearing the sky and earth apart. It also tore apart the void where Murong Yu was. Bang! In a moment of carelessness, Sun Yu was directly killed by a blast of energy on his body. Suddenly, after a miserable scream, Sun Yu's entire body exploded into pieces. Although Sun Yu spat out blood continuously before, this was the first time his physical body exploded. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, Sun Yu's body had recovered, and he'd blocked a powerful attack from Murong Yu. Otherwise, Murong Yu would have been killed as well. Holy Lord, I can't hold on anymore. Even with Murong Yu's treatment, it was useless. Sun Yu was in despair. However, he still didn't give up on Murong Yu. At this moment, Sun Yu's expression changed drastically. He looked at Murong Yu in shock and asked, Holy Lord, why did you give up control of my soul? Their target is me. I don't want to drag you down with me. Remember, if you're still alive, help me look after Shenzhen. Murong Yu looked deeply at Sun Yu, then took a step forward and disappeared from Sun Yu's sight. Sun Yu's expression was extremely complicated. He didn't expect Murong Yu to restore his freedom at this critical moment. However, the moment Murong Yu's figure disappeared, Sun Yu also moved and chased after Murong Yu. Since Murong Yu had restored his freedom and treated him so well before, even giving him a Tao weapon, Sun Yu didn't mind. Sun Yu wasn't an ungrateful person. Therefore, he decided that even if he died today, he would save Murong Yu. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.